I know, we're late. To us. It is what it is. But you're going to enjoy tonight's show. I promise you that. I believe this trio right now has got to be one of the hottest 49er trios. Somebody called us the Cabo Click. In fact, I'm going to show that comment because, yes, we are the Cabo Click. Cosmo, thank you so much for joining the channel. I appreciate you. I saw that you just subbed, but we've got a lot to talk about, and we're going to talk about it after this intro. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Thursday, which means we got I don't know what we're going to call ourselves, the triumphant trio, the Cabo Click of the YouTube. There we go. You got the Cabo Click of YouTube here with Larry, Vish, and myself. Larry, I'll start with you just because you're next to me here on the screen. How are you doing tonight, my man?
Doing fantastic, man. Had a great day at camp today. Talked to Chris Forster, Jawan Jennings. Real good day. Real good day. Great day of practice. Lot to report on. A lot of opinions. Good stuff.
Hey, and again, I mean, now the skin is getting used to the sun. You're not super red, which is good.
Seriously, because I brought my Longhorn hat. So I had the Longhorn hat, and I lotioned up. You know, I mean, I go Larry Krueger here for SB30. Before you go out in the sun, just apply a little bit to your forehead, maybe even a little around your cheeks. Make sure that you're protected when you go to Niner practice.
Yeah. You know what? That's 2 SPF references and free commercials that we've had on this channel already from Larry. He's good. He's too good at it. Vish, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm good. I've been reading the comments section a little bit, right? And it feels like people are starting to catch on to my thing, which is from the time I've started on YouTube, I think I've been late to every single show I have done. Yeah. And you know what? It's just my thing at this point. Larry's thing is that he impersonates Trent Baalke. Your thing is that you wear cool hats, Jesse. My thing is that I'm late all the time, I guess.
You know, you're not really late, Vish. You're actually earlier than Jesse and Lowry.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. Well, hey, there's a lot to talk about this week, and I'm sure that you've talked about it individually, but it seems like every time a show happens, more and more has come out from bigger name players or bigger name people within the NFL around one Trey Lance. And it started out very quick with people saying he doesn't deserve to be in the league and he needs to be cut. And then it quickly went to film breakdowns from JT O'Sullivan, whose friend of the channel had him on, which I agreed with mostly what JT said. I had no issue with what JT said or did because he came from a football aspect. There is no problem with criticizing Trey Lance from a football aspect. I get it. It's the other stuff that's a little bit crazy. And then recently we had Kurt Warner, Steve Young. We're going to play a video here in a few minutes. But just overall, and Vish, I'll start with you. What is your thoughts? You know, you can start with the Steve Young comments, but just overall this week, the coverage on Trey Lance.
Yeah, I think overall the coverage has been as polarizing as I guess his performance could have been. And I think the first issue with Trey Lance discourse, and I think this makes it hard for every single person that participates it, including us, is that everybody who talks about him is looking for a resounding conclusion. And the problem is we're about 15 to 20 starts away from even getting near that resounding conclusion. And the sample size is so small and the time in between each time he plays is so large that there's this built up expectation that he's either has to be this good or this bad, and we lose sight of who he was before, who he is now, and what is realistic for him. And so immediately we had the widespread of, if you were high on Trey Lance, there were some positives you saw from the performance against the Raiders. And if you were low on Trey Lance, there were some negatives for you to be able to see about him. I think overall the coverage is interesting because I think Kurt Warner, Steve Young, and JT O'Sullivan are all right? Like oh wow, that's tough, man. Maybe I should go back to the all white room. You guys seem to like that better. But I basically what I was saying was JT O'Sullivan. He was right about the football elements that were wrong with Trey Lance in that game, and that is true. Though I thought maybe a couple times, like for example, the first hitch, I thought that was a decent pass down. Now, I'm not saying that my opinion carries any weight compared to JT O'Sullivan, but I guess I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt there. But overall, to me, Jesse, the big thing is JT O'Sullivan simply evaluated the game. Steve Young and Kurt Warner evaluated the big picture with Trey Lance. And for that big picture, I went back and watched the Texans preseason game from earlier this week. Larry, you might remember, you and I went live after that game. And one of my big talking points then was that I didn't feel like he's improved. And Trey Lance from that Texans preseason game compared to Trey Lance in the Vegas preseason game has improved in a lot of different ways. Now, he still has to play a lot more, and whether he plays or not, that's the real big question with him. But there is improvement from the player from where he was last year to where he was this year. Not only in how accurate he threw the ball, which was more accurate, but also if you compare even like turn down throws and decisiveness, it was better actually in the Raiders game compared to that Texans game, for example. So things are headed in the right direction for him. I just don't think people are realistic on the time it'll take to get all the way to where he can get.
Go find this in my videos where I've clearly said that if the only way that Trey Lance was going to start over Purdy or Purdy wasn't going to start week 1 was if either Purdy wasn't healthy or Purdy basically down his own leg in practice, which is literally exactly what Kyle Shanahan just said in so many words. So I just didn't know if he would be healthy. But no, I would love to see a competition. Don't get me wrong. I would love to see a competition. And I think it would be great if they had one. But I understand and understood that Brock Purdy, if healthy, would be the starter week 1. So I don't know where this is coming from. Like, you must got me mixed up with someone else, or I know how it goes. Like, if you are on with Grant Cohn, I guess you just like inherit all of his opinions somehow. I don't know how that works, but that not me, brother, not me. I have not said that. Now, trust me, if it were up to me, there would be a competition, or I would even start Trey just to see what is there. But I understood what the 49ers were going to do. That became very clear probably around March timeframe for me. So either way, Larry, what are your thoughts this week on the coverage for one Trey Lance?
Well, first I had to invest the time to go. Obviously I watched the game a couple times, but then I went through all 27 plays that Trey had, and I evaluated them as best I could off the TV copy. And I feel like I've got, I could talk in great detail about literally every single play that Trey was involved in that Raider preseason game. So at any point, if we want to get into it, I mean, I got it down from the personnel grouping to what the defense looked like, to what hash the ball was on, to, how it was, how the play went, how people have reviewed it, why, I mean, I did the deepest of deep dives. I haven't done a deep dive like this since I literally was doing quality control in the Canadian Football League. So I feel like I've got a great autopsy sitting right in front of me of all 27 plays. And basically what I found out was that, 27 plays, 20 of them were passes, 7 of them were runs, which is an awful lot of passes. And then of those 20 plays, 2 of them were offensive line, just like so bad plays that didn't matter who was playing quarterback. One of them was a drop pass by Mason. The other was about 17 plays where I had about 10 or 9 bad plays and 8 good plays from Trey. And like the touchdown that went to Dwelly, I had that down as a bad play because it was a bad play. Shanahan actually earlier this week said, hey, he thought that was a good play because he wants to see Trey not think and let it rip. As far as that's concerned, I thought the best comment of the week post game was Steve Young. And we'll get into that. What Steve said about Trey, I think he's spot on. I see that exactly in practice, and it just makes me that much more encouraged that Steve sees the game the way I see it, or at least that we're seeing it the same. As far as the worst comment, Michael Lombardi should be taken out back and ridiculed for, the verbiage and the way he tried to describe Trey Lance as an inexperienced quarterback or a raw quarterback or a quarterback that needs more development. It was bizarre. His verbiage was bizarre. It was borderline offensive. If I was in Trey's family, I'd be very pissed at the way he brought that forward. I thought it was disingenuous. I have no idea what his agenda is, but I thought it was pathetic. And the only other thing I would say is that, I said in March, literally, when John Lynch spoke at the Combine, or in February, I said that it sounded to me like the 49ers were all in on Brock Purdy after they did an autopsy on their season, and that they were going to recommit to Brock Purdy and likely move on from Trey Lance. And, I've been ridiculed since the draft for not getting it right. But you know what? As we get closer to the season, damn if I don't feel like exactly the way I called it in February is exactly the way it's going to come down. And we can talk about how that's going to go and why that's going to go that way and why I feel that way. But I do feel somewhat like I pegged this thing right in February.
Wait. Can I hit the pause button real quick, Krug?
Yeah.
Because you and I had that conversation in February, and you said he would be possibly traded when, and I said he would be traded when.
You said, I thought, before the trade deadline. Right?
I said if he's going to get
the draft.
You said before the draft. I said if he's going to get moved, it's going to be this time or before the trade deadline during the season.
So then you're more right.
If we're giving credit, can I pat myself? Can I pat?
Absolutely. Plenty of time for all pats. But I just wanted to say at that time when I said that in February, the vast majority of Niner media, content creators, and fans were of the mindset that Brock had played and got injured. Trey had played early and was injured, and that they would somehow show up in the offseason on a parallel plane, on an equal playing field, and that they would literally show up in camp and compete for this job. And that wasn't my read on it. My read on it was that they were going to be all in, commit to Brock, and maybe move off of Trey Lance. And to this minute, I feel that that's going to happen.
Yeah, they definitely may. And Judd, this is fair. I definitely did say that. For the 5 days I was there, I did feel like Trey Lance was the best quarterback. But I also said that it wasn't like a major separation by any means, and it wasn't enough to overtake QB1. Like, it wasn't. Like, there's a difference in being the best and slightly being the best. And I also think it comes down to opinion. I was actually having this conversation with Brad on Twitter, and he felt like Brock Purdy was. And I said, I can understand why you would see that. I really can, because it was very close. And all three of these guys have been close at times, definitely throughout training camp, at least when the fans were there. So that's the way that I saw it for the 5 days I was there. But if I, and maybe, Judd, like, I understand like the expectation was something different, but maybe that should also be why we should be concerned about the QB room as a whole. Like, if it's that close and Trey isn't good the way people talk about him, what are we about to see from the other guys if they start? We don't know. Like, nothing is guaranteed. So I find it interesting. Let me get to these super chats real quick before they build up. And then I want to play a clip that Vish sent me. Larry, you were talking about on the from the 33rd team, which I think is a really, really interesting clip. And I just want to see what your guys' thoughts are on it. I took a lot from it as well. Brother Bob says, Kevin's dad, Purdy's pimp.
Damn you.
Happy BP with no interception today? How you feeling?
Purdy was great today. And I would like to say one other thing. We're there at camp. We watch camp. We report back from camp. But several of the things that we report on don't really illustrate true game football. We're giving you stats on completion percentage, but we're not telling you where those passes are going. Today, Trey Lance completed 100% of his passes, and none of them went more than 3 or 4 yards past the line of scrimmage. And And what I've seen in this camp repeatedly is that Brandon Allen, Sam Darnold, and Trey Lance look like they're playing in camp to boost their completion percentage. They don't let it rip. They don't go down the field. Purdy is the only guy that I see consistently throwing the ball more than 10 yards down the field all summer. And today was another example of that.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that one, for at least for the 5 days I was there, right? And I wasn't there for the other stuff, so I'm not going to tell you what you did and didn't see. But Sam Darnold, there was a day, and I agree with your assessment, by the way, that
he took a
lot
few
of times
shots down the field. A few.
No. I just want to say this. There was a day that Sam Darnold went, because I was given like A through D grades or A through F grades when I was there for each day. And then I would break down every throw to try to explain why. And Sam Darnold had a day where he went 11 of 12 with his only incompletion. He threw the ball away, and I gave him a B. And I knew people were going to be like, how the hell can you give him a B? He was 11 of 12. And then I explained where all the passes were and why I thought that, because everything was right near the line of scrimmage. I will say this, Brock Purdy, and I give him a lot of credit, is pushing the ball down the field a lot, or was when I was there. I thought Trey really lived in that 15 to 25 area, probably more than everybody, and was successful hitting those more than everybody as well. I thought Sam really did dink and dunk. I mean, we talk about dink and dunk. He was dinking and dunking. Purdy was taking the most deep shots, and he was, hitting some, not hitting a lot, whatever. But he was definitely letting it rip. Definitely, throwing picks, definitely letting it rip. But I really thought Trey was consistently pushing the ball in that 15 to 25 range and doing pretty well with it. That's at least what I saw.
No, and I was, I know what days you were there, and you're right. That's exactly what was going on right there. But like in the last, 7 to 10 practices or whatever, I mean, there's been 15 total, I think, or 16 total.
Sure. In
the last 5 or 6 practices, I don't know that he's thrown a ball down the field more than twice. So I don't know. And the other thing is, like in the game, we only see as fans the errors of commission, not the errors of omission. And you heard JT O'Sullivan said, hey, window was open here, it closed. Window was open here, it closed. Well, there's study and there's errors of omission that you don't see. And the guy who throws the pick, that's an error of commission, and everybody sees that. So I think that also has colored. So, because at the end of practice, people are going, hey, man, Brock threw another pick. Yeah, he did. That's an error of commission. And then all of a sudden, hey, Trey was, the game was a perfect example. Trey was 10 of 15 in that game, wasn't he? Against the Raiders?
Yeah.
That's a good completion percentage.
With a 110 passer rating, yeah.
Right. But the errors of omission, what he didn't see, the plays that he left out on the field, that changes the grade. And none of that gets passed along, by the way.
Yeah, and this is where the training camp stats are so incredibly frustrating. I'm not going to rant about it today. That's for perhaps another day when I'm got the energy. Today was a long work day. I don't have enough to be so amped up about it. But it's unbelievable to me, right? Because in practice, right, if the quarterback turns down a throw, you're not really seeing if he turns down a throw. And if that play in a game would result in a sack in practice, it's like the guy comes around him, he gets to get out of the pocket, extend the play, he might get a completion. Everybody will report it as a 1-for-1, but the coach might be charting that play and put it as a negative play for the quarterback. And this is where the context gets lost. And I would say even the amount of context you added, Jesse, is only so much you can add because there's so much going on in a football play and you don't get replay. You don't get anything. You just can see what you can see all in that 15-second moment. And you have to go with that. And that's where I'm not going to rant about it. I promise. But this interception rate, this interceptions, counting the interceptions, correlating practice interception rate based on interceptions you counted in practice to a real game interception rate. We have taken this to an obnoxious level. I think we're going to be Brad Graham was joking with me on Twitter, but I 100% think he's it's serious. The way people follow practice stats, we're going to play fantasy football for football practice very soon. Football scrimmages are literally going to be games for us. We're going to start betting on scrimmages, betting on dude, put Scott Tolzien back in the league. I'm putting all my money on Scott Tolzien in practice. Are you kidding me? The guy Dante Whitner called Baby Breeze?
Hey, I'll say this: when I was in the Canadian League, there was a coach who said to me, "Larry, put that motherfucking pen away." He was, I was jotting down notes. He's like, "Larry, put that motherfucking pen away." And I said, "Coach, what do you mean? I want to make some notes for the." He's like, "The film will tell us after the practice. We will go watch the film." And so it's like he wouldn't let me write during practice. And you know what? When you are writing during practice, you are doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you look down, you're missing the context of what's going on out there. And so I've been doing it because everybody's doing it. And I feel like, hey, man, I got to come up with some stats. And I don't want to just go to Grant's, channel, steal his stats, or go to Lombardi's Twitter and steal his stats. So I want to keep my own stats. But you know what? It's against all my better judgment.
Yeah, it definitely is an interesting situation out there for sure. Kless says, man, what a power trio. Almost as good as Rush. Larry should get that one. Has the O-line improved at all since the beginning of camp?
The O-line is fine. The backup O-line is hurting.
We're going to talk about that. Let's not get too in-depth with it. I've got it as a topic for sure. Yeah. Brother Bob comes back and says, Purdy's pimp upset because we can't trade Lance now. Oh, gosh.
Don't be so sure.
Nails, you said dink and dunk.
Now I'm triggered.
I will say,
no.
Brother Bob, if I can get back at you, I will. I'll use my son to get back at you.
I always I get a big head about our stamina on shows because the three of us just go on and on, right? Like Jesse, your instructions to us before we started this show was, hey, let's try to keep it
less than 2 hours.
Right? Yeah. Let's try. Brother Bob's stamina is off the charts too. He goes true. 10 minutes at a time, $1.99 at a time. Kevin's dad, Purdy's pimp, Kevin's dad, pig in a pickle. His stamina is off the charts as well.
And he uses emojis.
He's in on the whole show, the whole damn show for sure. All right, let me add this to the stream. You guys are going to have to let me know in the chat if you can hear this or not. Vish, do you want to set this one up and let them know what they're about to see here?
Sure, yeah. It's just a pretty cool clip from Joe Banner, who used to work in the NFL in front offices, actually worked for a pretty long time, and he actually worked with Kyle Shanahan. And I guess he had a strong opinion about Trey Lance before the draft, but he talks about why it's not working, and he talks about Shanahan. And it's not really, I think it's going to come across as negative, Jesse, but he doesn't really say it in a negative way. He says, I know Shanahan, I know his personality, he's a great coach, but the thing with him is that he's very stubborn and he falls in love and falls out of love very quickly. And once he falls in love, you can't change his mind. And once he falls out of love, you can't change his mind. And it's really interesting the way he laid it out. When I say it doesn't sound so convincing because I don't know Shanahan personally, but he did. And when he says it, it is interesting. Well,
I got to note this too. Ari Marov here. I think he's taken Grant's old mic with the dent in it. How did he and Grant both put a dent in their mic that massive? That's impressive. Anyways, okay. In the chat, let me know. Let me know if you hear this. Hopefully you can. If not, we'll kind of recap it and just talk about it anyways.
Then there is the quarterback situation in San Francisco. And we all saw Trey Lance start on Sunday in the preseason game. And if you just looked at the box score, you probably thought, wow, he had such a good game. But if you watched it, you saw that his touchdown pass should have probably been an interception. You saw that he was sacked 4 times. It was not really a great game for Trey Lance. Joe, Trey has been in these trade chatter all off season long. Brock Purdy is ahead of schedule. They signed Sam Darnold in free agency. Do you feel like Trey's future is in San Francisco? How should they handle all of this here with the regular season approaching in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, so my answer is affected a lot by the fact that I worked with Kyle Shanahan. And he's obviously a really good coach. I worked with some really good offensive coordinators. He is as smart, if not smarter than any of them. But he's a very emotional guy, and he tends to be a fairly short-term thinker. And once you get in his doghouse, it's really hard to get out. But knowing the way Kyle is wired, it's really hard for me to picture how they could ever just get back into a really good, positive place supporting each other. So that leaves me with kind of a simplistic that if they could find another place and give Trey a chance to showcase what at least I thought he could be in the draft, and let Kyle make his bet on, you know, the other guys he hasn't watched on, because it's just very hard. Once he gets down on a player, it's just very hard to get him back into a place where he's really objective about it. And that's not going to be good for any player, but especially for a quarterback.
And the reality is, I mean, Trey, of course, was drafted number 3 overall. They traded a bunch of picks to get him, but he missed that final year of college because of COVID, only played 1 game. His rookie year, he was essentially a backup. His second year, he had 1 start in a monsoon. His second start has a season-ending injury. This is a player who simply has not really played much, and he just doesn't have enough reps. And it felt like San Francisco was looking into last year being we'll work with him, we'll let him grow, and eventually he'll be our guy. But then the injury happened. You just wonder if they're going to have patience to do it again. And it doesn't feel like they will. There were those trade rumors this offseason. I got the sense they were willing to do it if the price was right, and no team stepped forward. We'll see if anything changes here the next couple of weeks. If he shines in the preseason and someone said, you know what, we'll offer a more valuable pick. But if not, I've said this a lot here on the site, it doesn't hurt to carry 3 quarterbacks after what happened last year for San Francisco. So I wouldn't be shocked if they also just keep all 3 guys and also have Brandon Allen potentially on the practice squad eventually, just so we have enough quarterbacks for this loaded team that could be Super Bowl caliber.
Okay. Interesting conversation there. I'll just take real quick. A couple notes that I pulled from it, or just as I heard it through again. One, I found it interesting that this gentleman worked in a front office, multiple front offices, and then also worked with Kyle Shanahan, and does know him well. He kind of threw it in there, but he's like, you know, maybe they need to find a new home for Trey, and maybe he can be what I thought he was going into the draft, where basically he kind of gives a vote of confidence of who he thinks Trey Lance can be. But the verbiage he used around Kyle Shanahan, I don't know. You can say it's not negative. I personally do take it as negative. When you say that he's emotional and he can no longer look at players objectively once he gets into that emotional state, I think as a head coach, that's not a good place to be. Now, that doesn't mean he's not a good head coach or any of those things. I just think if you are trying to constantly evaluate and make sure that you've got the best players at all times, let's remove Trey Lance from the equation. It's not about Trey Lance. If he is very stubborn in his thoughts and he makes quick decisions and then does not look at players objectively, I think that is a little bit concerning. I believe that. Larry, I'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the old saying, you know, if your premise is wrong, by definition, your conclusion will be wrong. Well, if his premise is that Trey Lance is in Kyle's doghouse, and that basically, I mean, to sum that up, I would say that Joe Banner says, I know Kyle Shanahan, Trey Lance is in Kyle's doghouse, and Trey is dead man walking. That's basically what he said there. That, you know, that because once you're in Kyle's doghouse, you don't emerge from Kyle's doghouse. But then some people would argue, well, Brandon Ayuk was in Kyle's doghouse, and now he's emerging as
it's the only one, though, right?
One of the greatest, you know, young receivers in the game today, based on what we've seen this summer. So was he in the doghouse, and is Trey in Kyle's doghouse? And that part is really debatable, because we have no real indications that he's in Kyle's doghouse. I think the 49ers always were more committed to the idea of a rookie quarterback enabling them to retain much of their talented roster than they were committed to Trey Lance, the individual. And now that they have Brock Purdy, and he checks that box as the rookie quarterback that allows you to pay Ayuk and Debo and Bosa and Trent and Fred and Dre, you know what I mean? Now I feel like, hey, you know what? He's got what he wants. I think, and I've always believed that Kyle Shanahan is a brilliant offensive coach, and he's a great play caller and play designer and play schemer and sequencer, but it doesn't mean that he's Mike Holmgren, that he's a quarterback guru that can bring your mechanics along from A to B to C to D and bring a guy along. We've never seen an example of that per se over a long term. We had 1 year with RG3. So I've always kind of questioned, in my mind, Trey Lance was Kyle Shanahan almost like challenging himself to do what he's never done before. And that's take a young quarterback through the lumps and the bumps in the road and get him through to the other side as a productive, guy. So, but that's how I'd sum that up. If you think that that Lance is in Kyle's doghouse, then it sounds like Joe Banner saying the only thing that can happen here is a trade. But then we could debate right there, based on what we've seen, is Lance in Kyle's doghouse, or is just Purdy the more refined player who's more ready to play right now, and Kyle's simply doing the smart thing by playing the player that's ready to play?
Go ahead, Vish.
Yeah, I disagree with you on a lot of accounts there, Larry. First and foremost, like, again, I think there has been something that's changed with Trey Lance. And Kawakami wrote a fantastic article on The Athletic a couple of days ago, just explaining every single detail of this quarterback situation. He did a really good job laying out how things played out, the Niners' mindset of all of that, how things are, where things are fair, where things are unfair. It was just almost, he had every detail there. And where I disagree with you, Krug, is one, I don't think they were as committed to the rookie contract originally, right? You don't try to trade for Matthew Stafford. You don't inquire about Deshaun Watson. You don't call about Aaron Rodgers the day before you're about to pick the guy on the rookie quarterback contract. If you have a little semblance of, if we can get a really good veteran, let's get out of this plan. But they couldn't finagle that, and so they went with the rookie quarterback plan. And then the other thing I would say is that,
but we don't know. We don't know that those things happen, and we do know
they admitted to calling about Aaron Rodgers the day before the
but
draft.
Calling about Aaron Rodgers could be anything from your due diligence. We also know, Vish, that they've stated many, many times that the reason they wanted to move off of Jimmy and go for a rookie quarterback was their desire to retain the roster that they had built.
Yeah,
that
true,
happened recently
true.
this offseason,
Yeah,
though,
but
was
that
the
was a
first time you
pivot
started
this
hearing
year.
about
Yeah.
that, though.
That wasn't what they originally suggested it a little bit with Jimmy. But remember, when Kyle was asked before the draft, will Jimmy G be on this roster on Tuesday? He said, I don't know if anybody will be alive on Monday.
Right.
And then after the draft, he came back and said, Jimmy G is really hard to beat out. That was a comment taken out of context. I love Jimmy, blah, blah, blah. Jimmy's our quarterback, blah, 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 blah.
But Lynch has also spoken on this, and Lynch has said, hey, look, we did our due diligence. We looked at our roster, with a veteran quarterback and with a rookie quarterback, and we determined based on on that little exercise that we wanted to go the rookie route, and he even said that we were willing to take
Kyle
a
admitted
risk
on a podcast with McVay and Peter Schrager that they wanted Stafford. They were going to go all in, and he was pissed off that McVay beat him to the punch.
But Stafford, Vish, was quite a bit before the draft.
Stafford was in January. Kyle said that he fell in love with Trey Lance and Mac Jones after the draft in January, when Eric Branch, I think, asked him, or Matt Mayoko, first question of the draft, hey, Kyle, how did this thing play out? And he goes, actually, this starts in January. In January, we started studying all of these quarterbacks, and we figured we had two in Trey and Mac that we could trade up for. So they've been a little bit in and out. But either way, the point I wanted to get to, where I disagree with you too, Krug, is it could be a situation where Purdy is just above Lance, but then that brings up the big variable of Darnold, right? And I tweeted about this actually earlier today because I found an interesting parallel that Zach Wilson has been handed the backup job with the New York Jets. He's the backup. They're developing him behind Rodgers. They haven't given up on him. They've been adamant they won't trade him and all of that. Whereas you look at the 49ers, perhaps nothing has changed with Trey Lance, maybe, but they're having him compete with another guy who, had two different opportunities to be a guy. And so that's where, I find it difficult to just buy, hey, it's just a Purdy situation. Because if it was, then you just continue to develop Lance, who you love, and maybe he gets a chance to do what Purdy did to him. But they're not doing that right now. There's a chance Lance could be the number 3 quarterback.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about this comment just real quick and say, it's actually, I don't know how you're going to find it. 187. If you haven't heard it, it's going to be really, really hard to find because it was on some weird app. Yeah. But remember the interview with Quincy Avery that Trey had where he addressed this? They asked him about the emoji and what it meant. And he said, it's funny.
Are you talking about the one that Trey sent to Rand?
Right. Yes. Yeah. And he said, it's funny that everybody thought somehow that meant trade or whatever. He's like, I didn't even know that people said that until Kyle Shanahan came to me jokingly laughing about it, being like, oh, I heard you want to go to the Titans. So I don't think there was anything about that meant he wanted to be traded to the Titans. And Kyle Shanahan himself is the one that told Trey that those were the rumors and was joking about it with him. So I don't think there's.
By the
any
way,
truth
this
to that
means
one.
good luck. Like, look it up. The fingers crossed literally means good luck.
Good luck.
And he says Rand Carthon. I think it's good luck Rand Carthon with the fingers crossed, which implies good luck Rand Carthon.
Yeah.
Well, and if we're going to take Trey at his word, and I think we probably should, because he's been asked this question at least a half dozen times. Every single time he has been asked a question, you're telling me that every single time he's lied? Because every single time he has said, I want to be a Niner. I want to be a Niner. And he doesn't hesitate. He's very convincing. If he doesn't want to be a Niner, man, he sure has me fooled. I've seen him answer this question 3, 4, 5 times, literally when I'm 10 feet away from him. And there's no, it's one thing if it's on TV and maybe you're got a bad angle or you don't hear the audio, but when a guy's 10 feet away and he says he doesn't want to be traded, you can get a sense if that's a genuine comment or said for effect. And he said it so many times and so forcefully and so convincingly that I believe him. I take him at his word, and maybe I shouldn't.
Brother Bob said, he asked you, Larry, are you worried about Moody being a missing machine?
Yes. Yes, I am. He did make 2 today, by the way. He made from 43.
There we go.
And he made from 35 and 45. But hell yes. And I asked a beat writer the other day, and I won't name him, but we were in the media room. I said, what kind of rope do you think Moody's got? He's like, 2 years. I'm like, 2 years, you're high. No way. Try two more games. He doesn't have 2 years. 2 years. That is the most pie in the sky thing I've ever heard. No way it's 2 years.
Well, I think it'll be cool, by the way, to watch him, because like everybody is like, oh, he was bad in the first game. But the entire point with kickers is that most guys in the NFL who are kickers have the talent to do it, right? It's about the psyche. Like, look at Nick Folk's career change, Jets, Cowboys versus Patriots. So it'll be cool to see his psyche, which everyone says is supposed to be excellent, right? If he's got that kind of psyche, he'll shrug off the fact that Josh McDaniels was kind of a dick and iced him twice, and he missed those 2 kicks, and he's getting made fun of for it. And he'll come back and nail those kicks, and we'll think we have like a Justin Tucker type confident like badass as a kicker. If he doesn't, well, then he might be Roberto Aguayo, who that pressure. Yeah.
Justin Tucker, by the way, when he was 23 with the Baltimore Ravens, he made 30.
Went 1 of 4, I think, in his first game.
He went 30 of 33. 30 of 33. So he only missed 4. He only missed 3 field goals his first year.
But he went 1 of 4 in his first preseason game, I think. Yeah. So maybe that means that
that's
Moody
a great pull.
Too.
I forgot about that. That is an unbelievable pull.
Yeah.
He's a machine. He's a machine, by the way. He's a machine. I'm looking at
somebody brought it up to me.
Okay. I was a little bit jealous if you had that off the top of your head.
Tucker's field goal
the only
percentage
man here
in his career is 90%, and he's made as high as 97%.
Tucker's the best kicker of all time already.
I've never seen somebody make it look so effortless, right? He walks up there like he owns the field. Like, I've never seen a kicker with that much confidence. And then it's like it's like watching Steph Curry miss a free throw. Like, you've seen it once or twice on TV, but you don't really see it often enough to feel like you actually have seen it.
For old school fans, Morton Anderson was similar.
He was, but like the way here's what this is where he separates to me is you look at his record breaking kicks and they're always in high pressure moments. A lot of the record breaking kicks came at like chances right before halftime type of stuff. He's like, oh, game's on the line. You need a 67-yarder. I got you. Like, that is unreal. Absolutely unreal. Flav says, seemed like option A was getting a top QB. They whiffed on multiple, including Aaron Rodgers the night before the draft. If that failed, option B was a cheap rookie and keep the team together, trying to improve. I think they had an idea, and the idea was get rid of Jimmy at all costs, and they went and did that. But I don't think there was necessarily a full-bore plan in place of who that was going to be and how they were going to make that happen. And Vish, I know that you critique them a lot for this, but your big thing is you don't trade up for positions in the draft. You trade up for specific players. So
only thing I will say too, as well, is I really believe from interviewing Steve Young during this time, remembering the timeline, that the only thing that we knew definitively at the point of that trade was that Trevor Lawrence was going 1. So I think that when they made that trade up, they're thinking about Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, Justin Fields. And they just knew that they wanted to make the first trade and not, get into a situation. And I believe that, there's a lot of people that have played revisionist history and said, oh, if they just stayed at 13 or 12, they would have gotten Mac Jones. The hell they would have. They would not have.
Okay.
They would not have gotten him.
Okay. Well,
I don't believe
I'll say this on the tinfoil hat. When they traded the same day that the BYU Pro Day was, and from what I understand at that point, because it was Daniel Jeremiah that was kind of saying it, and he's tight with Joe Douglas, if Zach Wilson passed his physical, the Jets were taking him at 2. And so I'm assuming that the Niners, when they traded up at that point, the day of the BYU Pro Day for that spot, I think they would have known Trevor and Zach, actually. I don't think it was.
Well, I don't know, because when I talked to Steve Young and doing an interview that week on the radio, I said, Steve, who do you think they're trading up for? And he's like, well, I know Zach Wilson likes the Niners, and I know that Kyle likes Zach Wilson. So this was early on in the process. But you could be right. They may have known. They may have just felt it was between Fields and Lance and Mac Jones. But I think that the true statement is that they traded up to get their pick of, as high as they could to get their pick of as many good young quarterbacks as they thought were in that draft. I think they probably liked a few. They ultimately wound up with Lance. And right now it doesn't look good, but I mean, it's, these things change, right? After year 1, Mac Jones looked awesome. After year 2, not so much. You watched, you look at Zach Wilson right now. I don't know how he's thought of. Justin Fields, you can say, would be the guy that right now everybody would say, oh, you'd much rather have Fields. Trey Lance is a higher QB rating than Fields to this minute. So it's, it's these things, it's like, they go up and down and stock market. It's like all we really know from this draft is that Lawrence indeed looks very much like the best quarterback. And he, of course, went 1.
Hey, I'll say this too, by the way, while we're on the doghouse topic, like we give Ayuk credit for being like in and out, for getting out of the doghouse, which is like a big achievement. Whether he was in it, questionable though. I would say Rodney Harris or Chris Collinsworth and Al Michaels dropping the Kyle Shanahan said in practice, like, I love the kid, but he's got to effing grind comment on the Sunday night broadcast when they played the Colts, when he was splitting snaps with Trent Sherfield, kind of indicated he was in the doghouse. What about Jimmy G? Jimmy G has been in and out of the doghouse every 2 months with the 49ers. It's like they fall out of love with him, and then they decide, shoot, he's our best option. We're in love with Jimmy for now, and then they fall out of love. Like Kawakami was saying that, if you remember, like in the middle of the year, right, it felt like Jimmy and the 49ers were at the best they ever could be. Before he got hurt, people were already starting the conversation that Jimmy could come back for another year. Kawakami said it got contentious at the end, again, between Jimmy and the 49ers, and that's why Jimmy and Kyle weren't so buddy-buddy, apparently, during the Raiders 49ers joint practice. So I guess to counter Joe Banner's point, if Jimmy can do it that many times, there's a chance for anybody.
And we're not going to know the real details on this because Jimmy, a lot of people said when Jimmy had the surgery, oh, well, that just proved that there was no way he could come back. But then Jimmy said the other day, I wanted to come back. I was trying to come back. And, maybe Kyle thought he was coming back. And Kyle seemed really agitated at the end of the year at Jimmy G. Now, was that because he got into the biggest game of the year and had to lean on Josh Johnson?
Did you read the Kawakami article? Because I don't want to interrupt you, but he answers these questions, right? He says that he heard Jimmy Garoppolo missed a quarterback meeting, and they felt like once Jimmy G got hurt, he tuned him out, and he was already out. And Kawakami said that the Rivers thing in the Super Bowl, even though Jimmy said he was going to play, they were not going to play Jimmy in the Super Bowl. So if it wasn't Brock, Phillip Rivers was going to play, not Jimmy G.
Wow.
That would
have been NFL history and instant NFL lore because everybody remembers who plays in the Super Bowl.
But we would have had Bolo Ty Rivers out there. That would have been crazy. Brother Bob with back-to-back comments saying that Vish is smarter than Larry. because of
Ooh.
his remembering of the
Look at that.
situation,
I
I guess.
appreciate
I don't
that,
know.
brother Bob.
That ain't right.
That ain't right. Sounds like I demand a recount.
Krug's about to open the thesaurus right now as we speak. The big words are
49ers
coming
daddy
back.
says, what changed
God
for
damn
Trey?
it! Oh, sorry.
What changed for Trey and Kyle from laughing about being traded to the Titans to now, when you consider all that has changed for Lance, is he has improved? Yeah, I mean, well, what changed was Brock Purdy. And I think that's kind of Larry's point, though, 49ers daddy, is that he doesn't buy the premise that Lance is in this doghouse with Kyle Shanahan. And I tend to actually agree with that, because the way that he talked about Trey Lance after that game was, to me, I took that. I thought it was very real. I thought he was being very serious about the situation and just talking about it as he saw it. And he really liked a lot of things that he saw from Trey in that game. And he said those first 2 sacks weren't on him. I like that he's pushing the ball down the field, even if it was an interception. Like, he really talked well about Trey Lance. And I feel like if Trey Lance was in this doghouse, that you would just get more basic answers on those types of questions.
By the way, I disagree with Krug on that point, but I agree with this too. Like, I don't think like he's in the doghouse from the standpoint that there's like a contentious feeling between him and Kyle. I think Kyle has just already done what Joe Banner described, right? He's put his foot down and made a football decision, and he's going with it. But I don't know if they have like personal doghouse conflict where it's like Lance needs to go talk to him because they don't know what the disconnect is. If that does that make sense?
Yeah,
like the Ayuk situation.
No, that's fair. That's fair. GTC Real says, at this point, I'll take Mike Kofer. That's a throwback kicker. Nice.
Look at that.
Razaki says, was Tucker a 3rd-round pick? No, he was an undrafted free agent. Big difference for sure. Flav says, it wasn't to get rid of Jimmy at all costs. It was. Yeah, it was. Because they brought him back for cost the next year. It was paying a lot for a top-tier quarterback or a cheap one to keep the team. It's not paying a lot for a mid.
Well, all I can say is I do remember John Lynch talking to us where he basically laid it out that they did an exercise of what their roster would look like with a veteran quarterback and what their roster would look like with a quarterback on a rookie deal. And it was a dramatic difference. And that played a role in their desire to go with the rookie quarterback. And I believe that. I mean, the way he laid that out was just very believable. But I mean, there were an awful lot of rumors about Stafford and obviously Aaron Rodgers. And, you know, I just kind of wonder if Aaron Rodgers was even ever really, I mean, really, you were going to get the Green Bay Packers, one of your primary rivals was going to trade you, Aaron Rodgers in the conference. I mean, I know the Niners did that with Charles Haley, but that was a mistake. And I don't know that Green Bay was going to make that mistake at any price, really.
Perhaps not, but the fact that they were calling the day before the draft to still see if there was a semblance of a chance. Like,
you know what it shows? Their lack of conviction.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. When you've made a franchise-changing move a month ago, and the day before you're about to fully plunge after you've already like 50% plunged into it, you have some cold feet and you're like calling. It's like the bride that's calling her ex the day before the wedding. Her ex might not sleep with her, but she's calling and trying like, please, please, please. Actually, mate, that was a terrible analogy.
Well, no, but I mean, there's also talk that Lynch wanted Fields and that maybe Kyle wanted Trey. And so if they didn't see eye to eye, but they wanted to come to some kind of an agreement, maybe the one thing they could agree upon is that they both preferred Aaron Rodgers. Okay, let's give it a run and see what we can do. Okay, we can't make that happen. Now we got to make a call. I mean, there's a lot of things that get discussed when teams are on the clock, and there's a lot of things that get discussed when you're at the top of the draft, like they were near the top of the draft, when you kind of have a pretty good idea who's going to be there. So I'm sure they discussed a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, Flav, just to let's rewind and go through this, and I'll tell you why it's pretty obvious to me that it was get rid of Jimmy at all costs. 2019, after they go to the Super Bowl, okay, they flirted with getting rid of him then. Now, obviously, they didn't do it. 2020 happens. You have the injury. Could he have played? Could he have not have played throughout that season with his ankle? There's definitely contention there. Then they make the decision to move on from Jimmy by trading up to 3. And this is something that a lot of people don't remember or talk about, but Jimmy's people came out and put it out there that they didn't like the way that Kyle Shanahan had treated Jimmy throughout his period of being with the 49ers. And then about a week later, Jimmy does his media tour and everybody just kind of forgot about it, swept it under the rug. But there was definitely contention there from the injury in 2020 and what Shanahan thinking he could play, Jimmy saying he couldn't, him not being around the team the way they'd hoped. So there was a lot of frustration there between Kyle Shanahan, more on Kyle Shanahan's side than Jimmy Garoppolo. I think Jimmy, I mean, I've said it before. I'm not like a big Jimmy fan as far as a player, but as far as his temperament, I think his temperament was really good and he should be applauded because they really did multiple times try to just leave him for the dead. The way they talked about him, the way they moved behind the scenes, most other players would have folded and Jimmy just kept it pushing. So,
and I think that's Jimmy's best quality, right? He's not sensitive, so he's able to make the correct business decisions for himself. And so other quarterbacks would have gotten themselves out of San Francisco 3 years before he did, right? Like a Derek Carr would have asked for a trade the moment they traded for Tom Brady, and he took the team to the Super Bowl. But Jimmy was shrewd enough to stay on a team that can win with, some of his flaws, and he was not sensitive enough to put up with some of the crap he had to go through.
Gammon says, Vish, you do not have the minimum 15 pieces of 49ers flair in the background. Most 49ers content creators have 37. That's a great reference to a great movie. If you know,
I don't like really talking about my flair.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is the minimum 37 or is the minimum 15? What do you want me to do?
All right, guys, you're going to have to fill me in. What's the movie?
Office Space with Jennifer Aniston. Classic.
I think
Classic.
I've actually seen that movie.
Get a
Make
room,
sure you watch
Get a
it.
room, you two. Remember that little dorky guy? You guys. Great movie. Vish, seriously, maybe one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, and it had no fanfare. It's so much an awesome movie. Watch it. You'll love it.
Hey, you said Jennifer Aniston. I'm convinced, Crew.
He says he's in.
Well, Brother Bob says, the main character lives in an apartment complex. It's called Morningwood Apartments. Morningwood.
I got it, Crew. You didn't have to repeat it. That's okay. I got it.
Brother Bob says, Nails, read my full super chats. They cost 2 bones. Nice. All right. We're going to hold off on the super chats.
I'm going to start calling him when he comes in. I'm going to be like, thanks. Instead of Brother Bob. Thanks.
All right.
Brother
let's get on to this next one here.
Yes.
Because this has been a major talking point this whole week. The interceptions in practice. And they've been a talking point really for a little bit longer than a week, but I feel like this week more than ever they're picking up steam as we get closer to the regular season and as, there's less people there covering what's actually happening. I think it becomes a bigger deal. Everybody's waiting for the 3 or 4 people that are there to report. Did he throw an interception? Did Brock Purdy not throw an interception? Does it matter? All these things. So, Larry, you being there, I'll start with you. Do you think interceptions matter in practice? Why or why not?
Well, they obviously do matter, I say, but it's also about context. So, like, give you an example. If you're one of these guys that doesn't take any chances with the ball in practice, that's fine, but you sure as hell better ball out in the game. And what we're seeing is I'm seeing 3 quarterbacks outside of Purdy that don't take many chances in practice and then didn't look good in the game, or at least in this case of Lance. He checks it down. He takes the safe route. He doesn't drive it down the field in practice. And then in the game, he looked utterly confused on multiple plays. So, but it does matter. It matters if you lose track of the defenders, you're throwing it right to a defensive player that matters. Or if your arm strength is such that you've lost zip on the fastball and you're trying to get it into a tight window, but you can't get it past defenders without them getting a hand on it, damn right it means something. So, I mean, I would love to sit there and be like, none of it matters at all. But that's not true. But then also, you can't be an alarmist, because ultimately, when you play quarterback in the NFL, you have to have guts. You know the old saying, no guts, no glory. And that means you gotta let it rip, man. You got to throw the 50-50 ball. You got to give Ayuk and Debo a chance, or Jawan, to make a chance to make a play on the football. Everybody's not going to be wide open by a country mile. You're going to have to throw some 50-50 balls, and you're going to have to understand, you're going to have enough accuracy to put them in a spot. And if you don't try some things in practice, you don't know how your receivers are going to react in certain situations. So I'll say this. Interceptions in a game are way different than interceptions in practice, but you never want to see interceptions at all, whether it be practice or the game.
Vish?
Yeah, I don't think the number matters. I don't think if they happen in practice, it really matters. Now, I do think there is a context to them that does matter, like Larry said, right? Like, if you see a pick where you can see, hey, he didn't have the arm to get it out there. Okay, that's interesting, right? Or like if you see a pick where it was like, dang, like he missed that underneath coverage, but that's like the 6th time he's missed that same underneath coverage. Like, to me, that's important. But again, we're talking about a process that leads to throwing an interception. To me, the raw number and whether they're happening is somewhat irrelevant, because I think quarterbacks tend to be more aggressive in practice. Like, if you're not pushing the scope of taking chances, throwing the football down the field in practice and being aggressive, then you're not going to have the confidence on 3rd and 12 when you have no choice but to be aggressive, to be comfortable to just stand in there and rip that ball out there. And you have to see what your scope of capability is to throw picks, and that might lead to throwing picks in practice, right? In 2018, Pat Mahomes, there was the reports about him throwing too many picks in practice. He won the MVP. Same thing, funnily enough, with Matt Ryan in 2016. Now, I'm not drawing a correlation between what those two guys did, their practice versus game, none of that, because there's really no correlation. What I'm saying is, just because interceptions are happening in practice and just because there's a number reported connected to them doesn't mean, hey, the guy is turnover prone, or this is this, or like this is, a situation like, hey, it's the same thing, Jesse, as the completion percentage with Trey Lance last year. Remember when that became a thing? Like, Shanahan wants him to be at 65% in practice. And I'm like, why does this matter, right? It's Larry just brought up the context of why completion percentage doesn't matter the other way, where if you throw the ball 3 yards down the field in practice and you finish the practice 11 for 12, sure, the spreadsheet reports that you're 87.5% in terms of your completion percentage, but it means jack diddly squat in the grand scheme of things because you threw the ball 3 yards down the field. So these practice metrics, these practice stats, interceptions, completion percentage, all of it, I don't think it really matters. The context of what's happening in practice is important. The statistical results reporting that, it's very irrelevant.
And also, let's look at it like the way it was. I mean, we talk about a practice as if it's like an even entity. Today in practice, Brock Purdy had 26 reps. Sam Darnold had 11 reps. Trey Lance had 5 reps. And also, if we went and looked at their touchdowns, Brock Purdy's got way, way more touchdowns than these guys do too. I bet you Brock Purdy has more touchdowns than Lance, Darnold, and Allen combined. So ultimately it comes down to, do you move the football team, and how does it look in the games? And the practice matters, but it's you play how you practice. No, that's bullshit. I mean, that's not even close to being true. There's all kinds of things that are different in practice than the game. So it's really matters quite a bit, the context. Like, for example, if you lose count of a defender and you throw it right to a defender, that's a way worse deal than, like, I've seen 3 interceptions that I can think of in the last 10 days where it's 4th down, it's a move the ball drill, Steve Wilkes is coming with a blitz, Brock's got a guy in his face, and he could do the Derek Carr non-competitive throw it into the ground, or the non-competitive take the sack, or you could just float it in the middle of the field and give your guy a shot, And guess what? That ball gets tipped. Gibson picks it off. He runs it back. And now it's like Brock Purdy threw a pick 6. But in the game, we saw Brock throw an interception like that. Was it in the Atlanta game where he basically it was like either a 3rd and 30 or a 4th down?
Play in it. He didn't
And
play
it
in
was
Atlanta. It was Miami.
Miami, where he
Up the
basically
right
just
sideline,
floated
yeah.
one up the right side, and he kind of
But
knew.
that was 4th and 2. They were taking a one-on-one shot. Ayuk
Yeah.
versus Xavier Howard.
Yeah, but that's not a bad interception. Is kind of what
that
the
was
point
not.
is. Yeah.
I mean, there's just that's all I'm saying, and I'm
punt,
not defending
basically.
all of his interceptions because believe me, I'm concerned if he's he doesn't have fastball velo to lose. So if he loses fastball velocity, that's going to be a factor in this season. But it's one of those things that's really difficult to me. Like today, I'm sitting on the sideline. He ripped an out from the wide hash to Danny Gray right in front of me. And so I saw the ball coming. He stuck it on Danny Gray's hands. And I looked over at whoever was standing there, Hammers, and I'm like, man, look at the arm strength there. I mean, you could hear that ball whiz out to the sideline, and he threw it inside of a small window, and he put a lot of zip on it. So I see examples of him having the same arm strength as I remember him having, but we'll see when the season really starts.
Hey, Jesse, can I add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
So I'll also say, Krug, to be fair and be completely objective on this, I also don't think the touchdowns really matter too. Like the number of touchdowns, sure, they have like some validity, but I will say specific to Brock, and this is the Jimmy Ward comment from last year after the Miami game, when he talked about how aggressive Brock is in practice and how aggressive he is working on his timing. For Brock, when we're talking about a guy with a weaker arm, his timing is everything, right? Because he doesn't have an arm that will bail out a decision that's a tick late, and he's still got to get the ball out there with pace into a tight window, right? For him, everything has to be, he has to know the timing of where he can fit the ball and when, right? And so I think part of that aggressive decision-making in practice that may lead to interceptions in a way, I'm not saying it's good to throw interceptions in practice, but I am saying it's good that he's making aggressive decisions in practice because for him, there is a specific timing that needs to be there for him to hit higher level of difficulty throws. And that's just because physically, while he has an NFL caliber arm, it's just an NFL caliber arm. It's not a special arm that bails you out of tighter situations where you're forced to make big boy down the field throws. And he will be forced to make big boy down the field throws. He made them last year.
I will counter by saying, though, that Brock is a gunslinger who averaged 33 points a game, and Trey Lance has played how many halves of football and how many touchdowns does he have? I mean, Trey Lance, they third down's the quarterback down. How many third downs did they convert in the first half against the Raiders last week? How many?
Wait, where did Trey Lance come up, Krug?
I'm saying Trey Lance doesn't take chances. He's more careful with the ball, almost to a fault. He's more like an Alex Smith. He went an entire college career without throwing a pick or had one his entire year. Brock Purdy's a gunslinger. To me, when you throw touchdowns, you're a gunslinger. You go for it. You're going to live by the sword. You're going to die by the sword. But guess what? When we saw that guy doing it in the regular season, 33 points a game. When we saw Trey Lance doing that in the regular season, we saw multiple halves of no touchdowns. Very few touchdowns.
No, sure. I didn't mean to compare the two. Like I more meant to compliment Brock for being aggressive, honestly, in practice. I didn't mean to bring up.
No, I'm just
Lance,
saying.
But
that,
I get your.
See
point
what I'm
too,
saying? There's a lot of people. I'm reading in the chat here. I'm getting roasted by brother Bob, who says that I'm trying to front for Purdy. I'm just trying to lay this out there for what it is.
No,
Brock Purdy's a playmaker. Good plays, bad plays. Trey Lance is very cautious. And then what happened in the game? He's so cautious that they're punting all the time and they're not scoring any points.
Krug, when Mama pulled me out of the crib, I wasn't a natural broadcaster, so it took me a while to process what you said there. It took
very
me a
insensitive
minutes,
comment by Lombardi.
I got the point now.
Here's what I want to say about the practice interceptions. I think they matter for Brock Purdy specifically because now I also want to say this. If Brock Purdy has another good year and then next year is throwing a ton of interceptions, they don't matter. Right? Like they stop mattering at some point. Once you've established yourself and you've proven yourself, they do stop mattering. And so next year he could have as many or more and they really won't matter if he plays really well again this year. But to me, and they're also not going to matter once they start week 1. So let me be clear about that as well. But at this very moment, we're trying to forecast or figure out what Brock Purdy is going to be week 1 of the NFL season. And a lot of people talk about that stretch from last year, which I agree. I mean, games certainly matter more than practice. However, if we're forecasting what Brock is going to be, I don't know that those games matter anymore because they were pre-injury than these practices do, if I'm just being real with you, because he is coming off of the injury. And I think that is a interesting distinction in why these practices matter. Those games last year and these practices mean nothing once that whistle blows week 1, but we're trying to predict at this point or figure out what Brock Purdy is and is not. And because he's had this injury, that's what makes this intriguing and a talking point. And I think a fair talking point to a certain extent, as long as we're providing context when we do talk about these interceptions.
And that's totally different, right? Like that when we're talking about the context of why they happen and what's going on in practice, that's different from what's going on right now where this number is just being thrown out and we're just giving the number credence without understanding the context behind the number. And that's where this has gotten a little obnoxious.
The attempts. I mean, one guy's throwing 26 times, another guy's throwing 3.
By the way, I feel bad.
If the guy who throws 3 throws more picks, we got real issues.
I feel bad for you too, crew, because the attempts, it feels like every reporter is like one off. So if you pick a day where Lombardi and Grant say that Purdy was 12 for 20 and you say he was 12 for 19, the comments just, woo!
Well, and then let's be honest too. I mean, we're not counting sacks and we're not counting running plays. It's like, there's so many plays in a practice that you can't really tell anything. Running plays, the runners keep running. Sacks, the quarterback keeps going. So, I mean, and then when you get into a game, suddenly sacks are sacks and the play's over. So there's just that it's the difficulty of evaluating practice. And that's why stats, the old saying, stats lie and liars use statistics. So you'd be better off trying to watch as much as you can and get a general sense of it than trying to prove your point through stats, because people have used stats all summer to say that Trey Lance deserves to start. And then you get into the game and you realize that Trey Lance is still pretty raw and needs more time. And it's kind of a ridiculous statement to say he should start right now when you do have Brock Purdy playing at a pretty high level. And I think most people, like let's say 99% of the people, maybe more like 90, I think now after that first preseason game, despite the fact Brock didn't even play, are now of the mindset that, Brock probably should start based on what they saw last year and what they saw from Lance in the game. I mean, that's my sense of it. If I'm getting that wrong, then maybe I stand corrected. But I've heard a lot of people who were very much in Trey Lance's camp kind of come around this week to, I kind of think Brock ought to start and we'll see about Trey.
Brother Bob
says
Vish is cooking all over Kevin's dad, Purdy's pimp.
How did you go through all those emojis so
I have no idea.
Those emojis so quick?
I was looking at that one for a while trying to make sense of it. It's like reading hieroglyphics. Razaki says, sign Rivers now. Seriously, Larry, call him. You have Rivers' number? We might need it at the end of this year.
I guarantee if you call his house, one of his kids will answer.
He's got a lot of them.
I'm just playing the odds.
Yeah.
I'm just playing the odds.
A lot of them, yeah. Gammon says, no. We need Carson Wentz. It's NDSU.
That's right. He's there.
Coach says, I think he's talking, do practice interceptions matter? Because that was right when we started the topic. Cosmo says, was keeping Jimmy last season about having a decent backup or not having confidence in Trey? What do you guys think about that one?
Both.
I think it probably was more about the confidence in Trey because they only really have this, were burned badly at the end of the year. They didn't have the NFC Championship game this predates the NFC Championship game. This year, you want as many quarterbacks as possible. Last year, I think it was much more about their lack of conviction in Trey Lance, and maybe some of the players' lack of conviction.
Yeah, and that second part is kind of my trump card on this, right? It's that 16-player meeting that Jay Glazer reported in like week 3 that the 49ers had to coax their leadership council to be behind Trey Lance, even though they're bringing Jimmy back. And then they also said some funny things to Mike Silver too, those players. But the reason that's important to me is that Shanahan and Lynch are not calling up Jay Glazer and being like, hey, Jay, guess what? We just called 16 of our leaders into our office, and we said, hey, guys, you have to believe in our quarterback. No, because they look stupid for doing that. One of the players leaked that to Jay Glazer. And if one of the players leaked that to Jay Glazer, it was out there for a reason. And so that's where I think it's a little bit of both. I'm 100% with you, Crew.
Brother Bob says interceptions don't matter if Brock Purdy throws them. How am I doing, Purdy's pimp?
He actually said too much. You're right.
He actually said they mattered more than Vish did.
Vish said they don't matter. Krug was like, yes, they absolutely matter.
Yeah.
Thanks.
GTC Real says, Larry, you play how you practice. It does matter. Brother Bob says, Vish, you're cooking on sheets now too. I saw that.
Who sheets?
Spreadsheet.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Oh, okay. Brother Bob is just too high level in terms of how he talks about and refers to things for me.
Brother Bob says, Vish is straight up serving it up. Purdy's pimp can't be objective. Dude, you go in on Larry so much. It's crazy.
Wait. Can we establish that something? Brother Bob, you might have to donate again, or maybe not. I don't know. Actually, donate again. Jesse's a nice guy. But can you tell us whether PP means pig in a pickle or Purdy's pimp?
No, he's trying to call me Purdy's pimp.
Purdy's pimp. That's what I think.
I'd love to know who Brother Bob would like to start. Who does Brother Bob think is the best quarterback on the team? I'd love to know.
Well,
and if it's Trey Lance, I'd love to know what's that based on.
Sean says, I don't view Lance as reluctant to throw downfield. I think he's making a weakness a strength by throwing the short ball and checking down. Lance is using practice to work on his craft, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's funny because his head coach just kind of chastised him for not letting it rip. So maybe he ought to adjust.
So I think there's a little bit of a conflation with what the criticism is and what that criticism means, right? Like, it doesn't mean he's unafraid to throw it down the field. It's just that there is a timing difference between when he sees it and how aggressive he is immediately trusting his eyes and letting the ball go. That's the aggression. Like, if he sees it and gets a visual confirmation, he'll throw it 25 yards down the field. But the process of when he sees it to when he's ready to just let it rip and trust his eyes is the aggression that they're talking about. It's not, he's not aggressively throwing the ball down the field. Although Larry's laughing, I think, because he hasn't aggressively thrown the ball down the field.
I haven't seen him throw the ball down the field, like literally deep. I mean, you're talking about a guy who watched every practice last year and every practice this year. Last year, he took several chances every practice down the field. This time, I swear what Jesse said was probably the most chances he's taken. 5 or 6, 7 practices ago, he was humming it in the mid-range quite often. I don't think, I mean, Jesse, you were there for 5 days. How many times did Trey Lance throw the ball 25 to 35 yards down the field in your entire time there?
Corrected.
Maybe once, twice?
Yeah,
Maybe?
no, he wasn't like throwing the deep ball by any means. He was living in that intermediate range, the 15 to 25.
I mean, he's ripping the intermediate.
Technically, 20 yards is a deep throw, but
that's I was going to say that's an
intermediate.
aggressive throw. 15 to 20 yards is quote unquote down the field, but it's that
15 to 25 is where he lived.
It's in that aggressiveness in terms of seeing it and throwing it. I don't know. Krug's not buying it. I might have to take.
To me, I've seen every practice. He checks it down a ton. I mean, he's not alone. Darnold does too. Yeah. Purdy is the only guy who actually challenges the defense down the field consistently that I've seen.
I mean, I think, who knows? I don't know what's going into it, but again, like there was the stat that came out of the Texans game that Trey Lance had pushed the ball down the field to a tune that was more than any quarterback in like 10 years in San Francisco. So it's not like he can't push the ball down the field or hasn't in the past. But right now, yeah, I mean, there could be a lot of reasons for that. It could be, hey, you're only going to get 3 reps. You just want to get into a rhythm and go 3 for 3. It could be he isn't seeing the field well.
It's Steve Young's theory, Jesse, that right now he's in a spot where he's trying to justify everything, the draft pick and everything with every throw
matters more for him right now.
Yeah,
yes.
Every throw matters, and he's gripping it tight. He's pressing. He's obviously pressing.
Yeah. William says 8 to 9 this year. Too many 8 to 9 wins. Too many distractions. Sophomore quarterback. Loss of depth on both sides of the line. Close games with a rookie kicker can burn us. Tough schedule. Ooh, that's a bold prediction, man. Yeah, that is a bold prediction.
I hear what he's saying, and he makes a lot of good points. But come on, man. Seriously, go bust out a depth chart of all the other teams, and then take a real close look at what the Niners have. If they go 8 and 9, this has been a colossal disappointment. Yeah, they don't have great depth on the line of scrimmage, but you're still talking about the number 1 defense last year that added Javon Hargrave, is deeper in the secondary, has the best linebacking core in the game. A rookie quarterback last year averaged 33 a game. What I'm looking at is CMC, Ayuk, and Debo all primed for career years. I think that's far better than 8 and 9.
I agree. I have them at 12 and 5, but it's a bold prediction.
It is.
For sure.
It's very bold.
Shakobia says, been hearing Trey needs time for 2 years, but don't want him to get reps. Brock Purdy with that offense Sunday and same play calls would have been a disaster.
Hard to say that.
Would he? Yeah, I don't know. It's impossible to say. Yeah,
it's hard to say that, and it's like some of the quick game. They did run some Cork Shanahan plays, like they ran 2 read routes off play action. Lance had an opportunity to rip it. He checked it down right, and so there's a couple throws in there that we've seen Brock make that Lance turned down, but we also haven't seen Brock just, run like stick flat as quick game, right? Like that's like fundamental day 1 install, everybody quick game. Maybe Brock wouldn't have done well. I don't know. I have a feeling that in terms of getting the ball out decisively on a few of those plays, Brock would have probably gotten it out.
Yeah, and I actually mentioned that when I was watching the film right here on the channel. I said, listen, there was a play in particular where I'm like, if that's Brock Purdy, he makes that play. But then there was another throw later on that was a throw that I think only Trey Lance can make, that Brock Purdy couldn't have made that play. And so it's like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, and that's the whole thing with them is the reason Brock Purdy should start is because he will keep the offense on schedule. He is further along in his development than Trey Lance. And then the reason that people still hang on to the Trey Lance is for those 1 or 2 throws a game that they see and go, oh my gosh, if he just had time to play and figure it out and he can be efficient, and then you add in these wow plays, you've got something special on your hands. And that's where the conversation keeps going back and forth. And because we don't know what Trey Lance is yet, and we may never know in a 49er uniform, unfortunately, that's why we have these conversations. So
if we don't know what Trey Lance is yet, and I think that's right, why are so many people convinced that Trey should have started this season as the number 1 guy? Usually if I like a player, it's based on, man, I saw this guy light it up in college, or he looks awesome. I've seen him do it, and that's what I'm pointing to. None of us saw Trey Lance play at all in college, and he's played very little in the pros. So I would love to know the people that were super hardcore about he needed to start this year. What was that based on? Why does he need to start this year?
I don't know. Okay, I can't speak for that because I was not one of those people. But let's pretend I was. If I was saying that Trey Lance needed to start this year, it would not be from the context of I know what he is or all of that. It would be from the context of, hey, this is a guy the 49ers believed in so much that they used 3 first-round picks to acquire him. And we're at a point where I don't know what he is. And so the reason I would want him to play, now I wasn't one of those people, but if I was, the reason I would want him to play is simply because my favorite team invested so much in a player. I want to find out what he is. Right?
But that's all based on hope, not on actually.
Oh, absolutely. But
that's not based on anything like I saw this guy. Like I saw this running back at Oklahoma and he's badass. And so I want him to play. It's like I want Trey to play. Why?
Yeah, but we've all seen his film in college now, though.
But I mean, he played at the FCS level. The other thing I would say is most of the people that are pushing hard for Trey Lance to play also are in the camp that believes that Kyle Shanahan is not good at picking quarterbacks. So if you're in that group that's like Kyle Shanahan can't pick his nose when it comes to quarterbacks, and you don't think that Kyle actually picked Purdy, like a lot of people feel like, oh no, it was Kevin Slowick who pounded the table for Purdy. So if Kyle didn't pick Purdy and Kyle's not good at picking quarterbacks, then once again, I'd have to ask, why is Trey Lance like the guy that ought to start? If Kyle's really bad at picking quarterbacks, shouldn't you be skeptical of Trey Lance and his abilities, not all in on him starting over Purdy?
I think it depends on what you thought of. I think it does on the surface, but when it depends on what you thought of Trey Lance. Again, we're still in the same spot, and this is what is so crappy about this situation. We've literally seen such a small amount of games from Trey Lance that your opinion of Trey Lance today is likely exactly the same as it was coming into the draft process. Like that's where we're at. And so there are people like myself who was huge on Trey Lance and thought he should be the pick. And so I still believe he can be that guy. And then there are people that did not like Trey Lance at all back then. And so they still don't like Trey Lance to be that guy. And that is fair. We haven't seen enough to know.
Couldn't you like the pick? I like the pick. I wanted the pick. I rooted for the pick. But I can acknowledge that it was a projection based on traits that I like.
Of course it was a projection.
It wasn't based on, hey, man, I saw this guy at against Central Arkansas. What he played was he played in a run dominant system where they threw it 15 times a game and they ran it 40.
Yeah, but you watched the film as well as I did. You watched the film on him. You didn't just go and say, "Oh, I like the traits." You watched film on him.
But Jesse, it was FCS film, and that's several levels. That's like saying high school film almost.
Let me say this because I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying you're trying to do this, Larry, but I think a lot of people run with this FCS narrative. Here's one thing I will say. I don't know what Trey Lance would have been if he went to Ohio State or Alabama. But one thing I'm very confident in is that if you took one of those other quarterbacks for one season that year and put them at the FCS school, that they wouldn't play. Trey Lance was perfect. Like as perfect as he could have been. He won a national championship. They went undefeated. He didn't turn the ball over. I don't think anybody could have done what he did in that moment for that season. He played perfect football. There's been a lot of quarterbacks, some that have played in the NFL that came from the FCS. Jimmy Garoppolo's one. Who was Romo one? I don't remember. Carson Wentz, Romo.
Yeah.
Other quarterbacks that have been good in the NFL that did not do what he did. What he did was not just, he had a good season at the FCS level. No, he played as good as he possibly could have. Like literally, if you said, hey, here's what the expectations are, he exceeded all of them.
No doubt. I mean, but he also ran over guys that he can't run over in the NFL. And Randy Mueller, who's a former NFL GM, knows way more about this quarterback evaluating than I know or you guys know. And I asked Randy, where did you have Trey on your board coming out? And he said, honestly, Krug, I did not have him on my board at all. And I was shocked by it. I said, why? He said, because there wasn't enough there. And this is a guy who does this for a living. This is a guy who's been a general manager in the league. He didn't have Trey Lance in any round on his board because he thought there wasn't enough data.
Two guys that do this for a living gave up 3 first-round picks and took that same guy number 3 overall. So that's why we're having this conversation. Randy Mueller could have thought that, and that's totally credible. And I'm not here to tell you that he was right or wrong. But that conversation changes when 2 guys who are employed by a team who have that opportunity literally give that up and go get him.
That's a separate deal. I'm just telling you that a guy that I know who is a good friend of mine who had no skin in the game and is not involved in any way, so he really doesn't care, said that I wouldn't have Trey in any round because there wasn't enough data to go on. There wasn't enough tape. He only played 1 year at an FCS level. And in Randy's mind, and this guy's evaluated quarterbacks for decades, that he wouldn't have him in any round. I'm just saying, to me, that's notable. Is it to me? I mean, I'm not saying that I agree with Randy or that I don't understand why the Niners drafted him. I'm just saying that a guy that I know who was a GM said he wouldn't have picked him in any round because there wasn't enough data.
What's frustrating for me about this whole thing, Larry, is that, and I'm not going to sit up here and pretend that I know more than the experts. That would just be untrue. But it's frustrating as a novice, and I think anybody in the chat would say that I would be a novice. I don't get paid to draft players and scout players or any of those things. But as a novice, I feel like I genuinely had a better read on who Trey Lance would be and could be in the NFL than the 49ers did. They somehow thought he was this dual threat quarterback. And I've got videos from before he was drafted saying he's not that guy. He's not the guy that's going to beat a defensive end around the edge. He is not the guy that you want to run a bunch by a designed run. He is a guy that you want to move the pocket, get him mobile, and allow him to play the quarterback position. He is a guy that when he approaches the line of scrimmage will keep his eyes downfield. By the way, you still see all of these things about Trey Lance. Everything I'm telling you, you still see from him. So I felt like I had a really good read on who Trey Lance was and was not. And the moment they started playing him and the way they started playing him, I was like, what are they doing? If that's who they think he is that really who they think they drafted? Because if that's the case, they made a massive mistake. That is not who he's ever been. That was not who he was ever going to be. They're going about this the wrong way. And that's where the frustration for me comes in with the whole situation.
Yeah, and I think that's the funny part in all of this, Jesse, because you and I actually, that's like, I'm a Lance stan allegedly now, though some Lance people call me a Brock stan, so I don't know where I really fit in all of this. But you and I had a similar evaluation on what we saw in Lance, but completely contrasting opinions, right? You saw the upside, you saw the same exact things as me, but you saw the upside and the opportunity. And what I feared was this lack of experience thing kind of creating an awkward timeline for him in San Francisco. And now I think my bigger frustration with this is that I think a lot of people are trying to validate that pre-draft opinion right now when you can't really. It's what I said at the very beginning of the show. It's
impossible
to. We're 15 to 20 starts away from or Trey Lance moving to like 3 other teams before we can say like, hey, it's completely over. It's not fair to write that off today. But it's just interesting to watch it play out because it feels like the 49ers were committing themselves to a certain timeline when they drafted Trey Lance, and we thought they were going to that timeline. But then after they drafted him, it felt like, wait. We're going to revert to Jimmy. We're going to stick with Jimmy first. We're going to see how it goes. Then we're going to go within the next year. It felt like after it happened, they're like, oh, crap, we actually got to develop him. Oh, he got hurt. Now he hasn't developed in 3 years. Crap. Well, at least we have Brock, who's developed, looks good, and we won with them last year.
And you remember those conversations 2 years ago. I told you 2 things, Vish. One, I said he needs to start day 1. They can't wait. They cannot mess around. He has to start week 1. The other thing that I said is if they want to develop him properly, get him mobile in the pocket, move the launch point, give him high-low reads and the option to run. That's how you develop him. They did none of those things. And so to me, if you had told me, hey, do you think Trey Lance is the right pick? If this is how we handle him, I would have said, no, absolutely not. Take Justin Fields. He's your guy. if I knew how they were going to develop that quarterback or play that quarterback, I would have told you, no, you draft Justin Fields. But not knowing those things, and I'm just looking at the prospect, what he did in college, coming from a verbose playbook, playing under center, calling his own audibles. I'm like, that translates really well with what Shanahan tends to like. I think this really could work. I was wrong. I had no idea that's how they were going to develop him.
I'll add this because I see Krug's up there ready to explode, and then I'll give him the floor. But I was a Fields guy before the draft, and I'll say that I like looking back on the situation. I don't think that at all. I think I was wrong. Justin Fields would not have worked with the 49ers. A lot of the issues I see in Chicago with Justin Fields, issues where, hey, it's what we're talking about with Trey Lance. Hey, open receiver in front of your face. Like, ball's got to come out on time. Why aren't you throwing it? I think he has some issues managing the pocket. He takes way too many sacks. That was an issue at Ohio State, and I think it's gotten exacerbated because his protection hasn't been as good in Chicago. He's a special athlete, but I as a guy who was pro Justin Fields before the draft, I was wrong. I don't think he would have really worked, seeing how it played out in San Francisco. All right, Krug, I'm done. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, where do you see the most mistakes? It's when you're trying to evaluate guys who are 1-year starters. When guys have or 1-year starters, I mean, Parcells had prerequisites for quarterbacks, and it was like 40 something starts, or I forget exactly the numbers, but it was like a lot of starts.
35 starts.
And it's
a 3-year starter, team captain. Remember,
I mean, there's things.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just think that that's really what we're talking about. We can break it down any number of ways, and I'm not saying that Trey Lance isn't going to be good. I'm the guy who wanted Trey Lance, but now it's pretty clear that he's very raw and is going to need a lot more time. And I hope the Niners spend the time and keep him and stick with it. But I get the sense that it's not going to happen that way. And it's just, it makes me frustrated because I feel like they're either going to give him away or, move on from him in a way that's not going to, where he's going to get to go somewhere else and get better. And 2 years from now, he's going to be a much better player. And everybody's going to be like, yeah, see, Trey Lance. And it's like, yeah. So how down do you want to get because he's not ready to play now? But all the people who were sitting there going, he should play over Purdy, those people are high and don't know ball. And ultimately, he may be better than Purdy, but it's going to be a while. It's going to be a year or two. And that's all I'm saying. And as when it comes down to it, it was a 1-year starter. Trubisky was a 1-year starter. He was a tough handicap. You'll see guys go in the top of the draft. And if you look at the guys who are 1-year starters, they fail a lot. I'm not sure why, but that seems to be the common denominator. So do I think Trey Lance is going to fail? No. I'm on record as saying that I think he's going to be a franchise quarterback, but it's perfectly and abundantly clear that time is not now.
Most definitely. I already got that one. That's what started this whole conversation. Brother Bob says, I would start Purdy.
Oh my God. Then shut the fuck up.
But he says you
seriously shut the fuck up. Hypocrite.
You obsess over him, Larry.
You banging on me and you're right there with me saying start Purdy.
Brother Bob says
Jesus.
Vish is fire and ice at the same time. You're on one tonight. This is like the Brother Bob show at this point.
Honestly.
Purdy's pimp, aka Kevin's dad, pig in a pickle, universal. All of them. So if he says any of those things,
unfreaking believable.
Brother Bob
says right there. He's just crushing me, calling me Purdy's pimp. Who would you start? Purdy. Thanks for coming.
He says Ryan G. Purdy's pimp is in here slobbering over Brock Purdy. Sean says that wasn't practice. Purdy's pimp. What wasn't practice? Oh, is he talking about the game?
No, Krug.
God, everybody's. Raziki says Purdy has the green light to be a gunslinger. No matter how he practices or recovers, he's QB1 in Kyle's heart until another high-level backup plays well for a short streak. I think that's a good point. I mean, he is afforded the opportunity to play free, but the flip side of that is he also did earn that opportunity to play free. I think this goes both ways. Like he we have to give him some credit, right?
This
Like
guy,
it's not
this
like he
guy's
was
not. Razaki is saying that he's a high-level backup.
Yeah, I don't know.
We were
I'm
talking
just
about
saying
the
as
first
far
part.
as far as this whole thing goes, like no, he's certainly 100% in a position where he can play free, and you're seeing that happen. But I do think that he earned to be in that position. So
I mean, Kyle's literally begging Trey to let it rip. I mean, he took a play where Trey was way late in the Raider game and threw an interception that bounced it to Ross Dwelly for a touchdown. And he's like saying that was great. That was great. Why? Because he wants to see Trey let it rip. He wants to see him not be so cautious. And that's part of it. What we're seeing in practice every day that does not ever show up in the stats is Trey's holding the ball a lot for a long period of time. You don't have that kind of time in the NFL. The ball's got to come out. It's got to come out now. I mean, that's in a nutshell. That's really the issue.
Which is interesting because something's clearly changed from when I was there. Like that was not at all the case. So I'm curious.
He ripped some great throws when you were there.
What
for sure.
happened? I know. And so then the question, Larry, is like, what has happened in this short amount of time?
Pressure. Steve Young said it best,
changed.
Jesse. He said, Steve, every throw, he's got his entire career linked to it. He's got it really is a revelation of how great of a guy Trey really is because he wants it so bad. He wants it so bad. And so he's gripping it tighter and tighter. And every throw is going to define his entire tenure. You can't play that way, man. You don't work football. You play football. You have to let it rip. And, you know, Purdy's out there letting it rip every day. He's throwing the 50-50 balls and giving his guys a shot. Trey's checking it down to running backs and checking and throwing hitches and stuff within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage. You got to take some shots.
I will add this piece of context that we have not added in the first hour and 36 minutes of this show to it too. Okay, Krug is talking about practice. I can't speak to that, Krug. I got to take your word for it. But I'm interested to see if he lets it rip on Saturday, primarily because, hey, this was his first game where he had to actually get touched, right? Like you're wearing the non-contact jersey in practice. There's people around you, but they can't really hurt you. This was the first game after he snapped his ankle. Now he's actually playing where he can get touched and get hit. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo's first preseason game Monday night at Denver with Booker McFarland and Jason Witten on the commentary. He had a passer rating of 0.0 coming off that ACL injury, and he looked about as jumpy and as tentative as you could see a quarterback. He was clearly bothered by having to deal with that pressure and contact for the first time. This was Lance's first game back. Like Krug said, we've reached a point in his career where every throw is either we write his eulogy and it's a referendum on why the 49ers shouldn't have drafted him, or it's why he's the next Mahomes and why the 49ers should be playing him. Like there's no in between of, hey, this is a young quarterback who improved over an offseason and he has a process where he needs to get better. But that's where I do stand a little bit on it where, hey, what if he comes out and rips it on Saturday? This is like, do you remember the first 3 practices of training camp? It like everybody started writing his eulogy, like Brock came back, Trey has been bad, all of that. Then 3 practices later, people were like, hey, Trey should be starting. Trey is killing it. Trey was ripping it. So we ride these up and down waves, and we could be riding another wave on Saturday, which we shouldn't, because there's a process for Trey Lance, and 1 game and 20 throws are not going to give us that much more information there.
Mike Drops with Monster says it's Trey's incremental improvement. Look at his improvement from the time of the injury to the first preseason game. How do you improve with no live reps and change your motion if you aren't special? Yeah, and I think that's kind of where Larry's at, is like he does think that he can be that guy. Yeah. He just thinks it's going to take a while. And I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but those are the things that you see. It's like, wow, a lot of people really said he can't change his throwing motion in an offseason. Once the bullets start flying, there's no way. But the kid clearly has talent and cares a lot. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to do those things. So.
Can I add one thing? Because I'm taking it, because you guys don't read the comments as much as me. I'm taking it from this guy named Chai Sun, who's like, oh, this guy said Justin Fields is better than, or Trey Lance is better than Justin Fields. No. I said Justin Fields would not have worked in San Francisco. That's completely independent of how I rank him compared to his peers in his draft class. But there's too many things in his game. I feel like, Jesse, would you agree with me? There's stuff
Bro,
in his game,
I talked
in the
about it.
passing game, where it's like Shanahan would not.
Right. The reason, and again, we going back to the whole thing, I told you why I thought Trey Lance would be the right pick, because of the playbook, because of the under the center, because of the calling his own audibles and protections, all those things, right? And I'm looking at a Shanahan offense, and I'm looking at what Trey Lance is doing in college. I'm like, this lines up. And then I'm looking at Justin Fields, and back then I was new to the 49ers community on Twitter, and everybody who's everybody was Justin Fields. And I'm like, damn, I'm going against the grain here. Like, I really got to be on my stuff. What are they seeing that I'm not? And I saw the talent in Fields, but one thing that I talked about almost relentlessly back then, I'm like, Kyle is not going to be okay with the way that he holds onto the ball. He holds onto the ball way too long in college, and that could translate in the NFL. And guess what? Thus far, it has completely translated into the NFL. Doesn't mean that he won't improve or that won't change. But Kyle Shanahan, we just showed a video to start this whole thing where a guy who's worked with Kyle says he falls in love and out of love very quickly with players. You don't think that Justin Fields plays and looks the way that he's looked at times in his first 2 years, and Kyle's like, F this dude. He can't even make a throw that I'm telling him is open right in front of him. The same things that we say Trey Lance is having a problem with, Justin Fields also does. So why would it work with Justin Fields and not Trey Lance? It could have also been a disaster.
Right. The running would have helped, though. The running would have helped.
There's also, workout traits and film. Like, Javon Kinlaw is probably the strongest guy on the team, but he doesn't have functional strength against the run. So he just gets moved all the time against the run. You look at Justin Fields. Justin Fields ran 4.4 flat.
Yeah.
He was sacked a ton. So he's got speed, but does he have, escapability? Does he extend plays? You're right. He held the ball too long. That's why he got sacked.
Here's the
so it's like you got to look at the traits and then see like how it translates to the film. Kyle's one of these film guys that the film tells all, and it doesn't matter about your traits really.
Here's the stat that sums it up with Justin Fields, right? In terms of pressure, this percentage of your pressures that led to sacks. So what percentage of the time when you're getting pressured, you're actually getting sacked, right? You would think Justin Fields would be top of the NFL because he's one of the most electric athletes at the quarterback position we've ever seen, right? He would be such a difficult guy to sack. Justin Fields is fourth worst from the NFL in terms of pressure to sack rate at 27.8% of the time. When he gets pressured, he gets sacked. And the two issues that are like why this happens and why it wouldn't work, in my opinion, with Shanahan, despite how special his running is and how special his throwing can be if he keeps making the improvements he seems to be making, is because one, he doesn't take available throws when they're there. It's the Trey Lance issue where he hesitates. And two, he, as good as his running is, instinctively, he moves himself into pressure a lot in that tight space and confined space. And these are just things like when we're saying, hey, why isn't Trey Lance playing? And why is Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy, these guys, like fundamentally, these guys were cleaner at little things like that, where Justin Fields is a supreme athlete, special talent, but those little fundamentals that we're talking about that the Niners seem to really care about with their quarterback because they want him to play within the system and within the system first, it matters in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. 49ers, Oregon. What's up, man? Oregon. He says, thoughts on Wilkes' defensive calls in the game. I mean, he definitely is more aggressive, I think, than maybe what we've had there prior. I'm curious to see if that translates. We've seen it in practice. We saw it a little bit in that game, and I'm curious to see if that actually translates when the real games start. It is hard to judge him overall on a preseason game. But overall, I mean, I do like Wilkes. I like the hire, and I think that long-term throughout this year, it'll be fine. But Yeah, definitely. I mean, the defense got whooped. And I don't know how you call a game around that when the defensive line's getting moved like crazy. So
Once again, though, I mean, it's like, hey, I went to a 5-star restaurant last night. Did you? I mean, or did you go to a restaurant that was named after a 5-star restaurant? There was no Armstead. There was no Bosa. There was no Hargrave. There was no Greenlaw. There was no Warner. There was no Mooney. I mean,
There was no game planning.
There was no. I mean, I don't know that it's fair to Steve to evaluate him off that. They got whooped, no doubt, by the Raiders. And the rookie quarterback from Purdue, I thought looked spectacular. I don't know what you guys thought. But what I expect to see from Wilkes is more linebacker blitzes. I think, the one thing that's really abundantly clear is they're way deeper and more talented in the secondary than they were a year ago. I don't think Isaiah Oliver, who dropped a Purdy interception today, I don't think he's going to be the nickel. I think they're going to probably either go – I think Demo's going to be the nickel, and I think Womack or Ambry Thomas is going to wind up playing opposite Mooney Ward. But they're just so much deeper in the secondary. They're loaded at linebacker. Their first-team D-line is spectacular. Now it's about that second and third-team defensive line. Are they deep enough, and are they talented enough? Last year, they played their guys in a rotation. Chris is going to play his guys in a rotation again. The question is the rotation good enough? And that's like a TBD, because it's not the same defense when you take away, Ebukam, Amenahue, Willis. Those guys averaged 91 snaps per game in the 49ers' 3 playoff games last year. So it matters who the backup D linemen are, and I still got to see a lot more. And maybe there may even be a guy or two that they need that isn't here that they may have to add along the way to that defensive line. I've really questioned the defensive line depth.
Crew, can you repeat what you said about the nickel position real quick?
I don't think Oliver's the nickel.
And who do you think is the best nickel on the team?
Well, I think they're going to play their top 3 guys. I think they're, based on what we've seen in practice, they're playing Mooney, and then Steve said the other day, I got a Rolodex full of options at nickel. So I think they're not satisfied with Isaiah Oliver. So I think you've seen AJ Parker get run. You've seen Jameson get run. I think Lenore will be the guy who gets the start, but there's also Quantrez. Quantrez has been really, really good. So, I mean, they've got options there. I mean,
Can I pat? We talked about the nickel position predictions. I said Oliver won't start. It'll be Womack, Lenore, and Mooney.
You're right.
And Lenore's the best nickel. Oh, thanks, crew.
I think you're right. If I had to predict it, I would say Womack and Mooney outside and Lenore inside.
Interesting.
I like it.
Vish, not to toot my own horn, but beep beep, if you know what I mean, right?
Oh yeah. Well, you were on it from like the beginning though.
No. I'm not saying. I'm saying that's you tonight. You've been on it tonight. No, your predictions are coming through. I don't know. I don't think I was on that from the beginning.
I feel like you were,
definitely
though,
were.
Former Oregon Duck.
I don't know. Well, on Lenore, yes. On Lenore, I was, yes, but not the Oliver thing. I didn't know who was going to start at nickel. That you were spot on. But that's also, just to be fair, like I'm an Oregon Duck fan, so of course I was going to hype up Lenore when he was a 5th round pick. I'm like, yeah, we got our guy. Like, I didn't know.
Are you going to hype up Bo Nix this year, man?
No, I'm not going to hype up Bo Nix. No. I did hype up Justin Herbert, and I did really truly believe when he I sounded like Ron Jaworski. Truly believe. Oh, no, not Jaworski. What's his name? Anyways, I actually did think a few games into his sophomore year that Herbert was going to be special in the NFL, and that definitely came true. Let's see. Mike Drops with Monster says belief in Brock is also a projection, Larry, with 8 games.
At least you got those 8 games.
You do have that. Brother Bob says Nails is getting heated. Cook, my brother, Cook. It is. I'm not angry. I'm passionate. Don't confuse the two. I am not mad, but I am passionate about these conversations. Brother Bob says Vish. Purdy's pimp don't want that smoke. He's repetitive.
He's looking to create conflict between me and
he
Larry.
is. I know he is.
Unbelievable.
Gerald Hodges.
Joshua Wyatt says
I also like Brock Purdy. I've been bitching and moaning and doing lots of super chats, but at the end of the day, you know what? I agree with Lowry.
Lowry. Joshua
That Lowry
Wyatt.
gets me every time.
Joshua Wyatt says Lance needed 40 starts when he hit the league. 2 years later, he still needs 40 starts. 49ers blew the window. Blame who you want. It's over. No way they can pick up his option after they pay Bosa. No, they're not going to pick up his fifth-year option. There's no way. Cosmos says at the end of the day, 49ers chose Purdy to lead them for a reason. Trey could become good QB, but with time against him, it won't be with this team. I think it's starting to look that way. I think that's a fair take. Mike Drops with Monza says, do you guys think that Kyle had a long-term plan for Trey? I question their plan to even get Trey, so I don't know if the plan. Here's what I think happened, and this is my truth. This is the way that I believe it, is that I think Kyle Shanahan fell in love with the thought of Trey Lance and what he could become. I also think that he really felt like if I just sit him for a year, things will work themselves out and he'll end up being fine. And the moment that it wasn't what he thought, he started to panic and was like, oh God, I don't have time to develop. And we're trying to win. And I thought he would be better. And how did this, like, why isn't he just Patrick Mahomes? Like, I really think that. And I'll back that up with the fact that he was asked about the development of Trey Lance, I think going into year 2. And somebody asked him, well, how do you work with Trey Lance on his mechanics? And he goes, we don't do that here. That's for the off season. He genuinely just expected that Trey Lance would be great going from year 1 to year 2. And that didn't happen. And when he got injured, he ran out of patience.
The assumption was that it's what Lowry always says.
Lowry.
That football means so much to him that he's going to put in every single waking hour in the offseason to take those strides. And I agree with you. The interesting thing with the long-term plan is a lot of people speculate that some of the frustration was that, hey, our long-term plan was with him as a runner, and those plays just didn't seem to work. And Kawakami even touched on that, and it feels like he was saying that it looks like they've removed that running element from him. But a part of what they talked about when they sat him the year was, hey, there's a thing with quarterbacks when you play him young. We don't want to just put him out there and use his dual threat ability. We want him to be a quarterback, right? He used to say, we want him to be a quarterback who can run. That's the exact phrase Shanahan would use. And that's where the long-term plan, it feels like it kind of changed, like you mentioned, on what they expected from him when maybe year 2, that entire offseason, which brings back, why did they bring back Jimmy? That conversation too. He just never reached the level that they thought he would just turn into after sitting a year.
Yeah.
Krug?
I mean, as far as a long-term plan, I definitely think initially they had a long-term plan, but things changed last year. I mean, Trey had the injury. Brock played, we talk about this, and I know there's a lot of jokes going back and forth, but Brock Purdy played spectacularly last year. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there aren't no other rookie quarterback in recent memory has played that well. So that I mean, maybe at the end of the day, we're making this a lot more about Trey than it really is. It's probably not nearly as much about Trey and what Trey hasn't done or what Trey's not doing or some trait that Trey doesn't have or some weakness in Kyle. And Kyle's just saying, hey, Brock was better. Brock's way more developed. He's ready to play now. I've said it all off season. I think the real reason, I think now Shanahan is really in love with Brock because I think they see the game the same way. They're both similar guys. But I think it's really just more about Brock's timeline jived with their timeline. They want to win, not eventually. They want to win now. And they think that Brock gives them the best chance to win now. I don't know that there's a whole lot more to it. I think we've all, used this, really well to create a lot of content this off season. But I think it's really just that, just his timeline kind of jives with their timeline. And so they're going with him.
Hey, I will. Can we say this too? I've never heard Kyle talk so glowingly about a quarterback the way he's talked about Brock this offseason, right? Like, even with Jimmy, like I remember, I always mention this. David Lombardi used to throw alley-oops to compliment Jimmy. He would be like, looks like Garoppolo is really changing the plays at the line. Is that something that as a veteran that he really used to do? And Kyle would go, well, we coach all our quarterbacks to be on top of our checks. They're all on top of it. So you wouldn't even compliment him when you would give him an alley-oop to compliment him. And with Brock, it's just been like gushing every chance he has an opportunity to speak about Brock. In fact, even with all he gave up for Trey, I've never heard him gush about Trey at any point the way he's gushed about Brock at multiple different points.
William says, on paper, I agree with Larry Krueger. This is going back to the his original comment was they would finish 8-9. On paper, I agree with Larry Krueger, but the NFC East and AFC North have 3 playoff teams each. I have losses to Pittsburgh, the Giants, the Cowboys, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Seattle, Philly, and Baltimore. Baltimore at QB and O-line. So he's saying, they have good QBs and O-lines and we don't. Have your predictions changed with the offseason? My prediction really hasn't changed. I had us at 12-5 early, like as soon as the schedule came out. I right now am going to stick with that. But I do think that the real topic in conversation, I've said this all week, really should be about the 49ers depth right now in the trenches, because that is one thing that they have had in the past, especially on the defensive line. Offensive line depth tends to matter when you have injury, but defensive line depth always plays throughout the year, even if it's 10% of the snaps. And if that defensive line doesn't have the depth that we're accustomed to, it could become an issue potentially and cost them a game or two that I did not see coming. I think that's a possibility.
Their D-line means everything. Their D-line drives their defense. They need their D-line to be dominant, and they're going to play their backups. I mean, Kasarik told me as much face-to-face 10 days ago. He's like, we're not going to play our first-team D-line more than we played our first-team D-line last year, despite how good they are. So, you know what that means? It's your move, Cleveland Farrell. It's your move, Kevin Givens, Javon Kinlaw. I will say this though, this week, and the one guy on that D line that is so exciting is Robert Beal Jr. There was a play in yesterday's practice where he beat the great Trent Williams for a sack, and he just dipped the shoulder, put one move on him, and went and got the quarterback. And in some ways, the more I watch Beal, the more I think, man, if Beal can stay healthy, he might be the ideal guy to start over Drake. Here's why, and I love Drake. But if you can have a double team on Bosa, and you're going to double team Hargrave and Armstead at times, that means that Beal or anybody out there is going to get solo blocked. And if you can really burn the edge, and we saw it last year with the guy who ended Purdy's deal. What's the Reddick? Is Reddick super special and battling with all these counters? No, but he's an awesome speed rusher who's 238 pounds and can just fly off the edge. Well, that if you put Beal and he can really fly off the edge, and I watched it yesterday in practice, he flew off the edge. You saw that 4.4 speed. That right there could be really impactful. So I'm eager to see if he can stay healthy and get on the field, and if he can, Beal Jr. could be a force. Yeah, absolutely.
How does he look? Like because it was apparent, right?
Perfect body type
athlete he was in Georgia. Does that stand out even amongst NFL players that he looks like an Adonis for the position?
Yeah, I mean, and he's got he's 255. He can't backpedal. Can't play coverage. There's all kinds of things he can't do. But what he can do is just burn that edge. I don't even think he can counter. But all he's got to do is just try to run the loop. And if he can do that and take some of the pressure off of Jackson, man, the two of those guys could be huge this year. So that's the big hope, is that Beal and Jackson can just have phenomenal years opposite, as the other guy on this incredible four-man line.
I brought up this comment from Mike Drops with Monza because he actually had a question asking you specifically about Beal. So there it was. He answered your question. William Bonnet, we got that one. Okay.
I think the Niners get Pittsburgh, by the way, and I think they get Dallas. Some of those other games are going to be pretty tough, but I like them against Pittsburgh and Dallas.
Yeah, I think I had them losing to Dallas and beating Pittsburgh. I did have them losing to Cleveland as well in my 5 losses, but I had them beating Philly. So
Dorian
Danker
Thompson
says-
Robinson.
I have them losing to Pittsburgh.
I mean, Dorian Thompson Robinson's not going to play, right? It's going to be Deshaun Watson. But if you guys watched any of the game tonight,
Yeah, he
DTR,
looked awesome.
DTR is looking good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, crew, that was us too. Come on.
Yeah,
together.
we like DTR.
Danker says,
There we
thanks
go.
for the civil convo in these wild preseason times. Yeah, it definitely has gotten wild. Mike Drops with Monza says, what happened is the reps were live and he hadn't played in 11 months and his head coach came out passing. He wasn't a game speed comfy. No, it wasn't sabotage, but it wasn't a good game plan either. Kyle made a mistake. Or some
Okay, let me. Okay, this is another narrative that just needs to be squashed. Do you have more pressure as a quarterback throwing on 1st and 10 or 3rd and 10?
third and 10, presumably, yeah.
3rd and 10, yeah.
So that's really all that happened here is that Kyle, wanting to take some pressure off of Lance, had him throwing on 2 of the first 4 or 5 first downs, and he had a limited sample size. So he wound up throwing a little bit more because when you throw on 1st down and you get sacked, guess what happens? Now you're second and 13, and you're most likely going to throw on 2nd and 3rd down. So I don't look at it at all like sabotage. I think that people are looking at it as sabotage. You're totally
to be fair,
wrong.
he is saying it wasn't sabotage. He just thought the game.
No, I
plan
know,
from
but there
Kyle
have
was
been
a little
people
off.
that suggested that Kyle
But they don't-
sabotaged
they
this
don't-
thing. Having your quarterback throw on 1st down is actually a way to kind of help him establish a rhythm because you're taking the defense by surprise. You're surprising them. They're thinking it's 50-50 run pass, and here comes the pass as opposed
but
to 3rd and
there's-
10. Where
There's
we all
not
know you're going to
game
pass.
planning that goes on in preseason, right? You're just calling a lot of your generic install plays, like day 1 install concepts, like slant flat, stick flat. These are quick game concepts in every offense. These are in high school offenses, right? You're calling those because you just want to see what your quarterback can do in those situations. There's not a, hey, in this coverage, we're going to game plan for this.
Right.
And I agree with Krug.
Passing layups.
That's where it takes an extra step further because the sequencing of plays gets screwed up when you miss plays on time, right? So when you don't throw it on quick game on a play that can get you into 2nd and 4, which then turns into a running down, when you get moved behind the sticks because you take a sack or it gets to 2nd and 10, that's where these pass plays start to sequence and confound. Now, the only thing I would say that you texted me during the game, Jesse, that is a little different is I think there's a clear, hey, Lance looks a lot more comfortable when they put him under center and they move the pocket for him than versus Lance does not look comfortable, whether it's shotgun straight drop back or under center straight drop back. He looks a tick slow in terms of getting the ball out in those situations versus like perhaps maybe they could call some more easy boots for him early. I could see it, but I think a lot of the hey, Shanahan didn't do this for Trey, Shanahan didn't do that for Trey is a little bit overblown because it's not like they're calling anything drastic for anybody.
Yeah. Also, I think that it's possible that if Trey Lance has to play at some point this season, that the game plan obviously would be hand the ball off. And now that they've seen him in these boot action type moments, they're like, okay, this probably, instead of running him, because we saw him get hurt in that way, maybe they actually do figure out during this time that that's the way to play him. But in the preseason, Kyle Shanahan also may have said, you know what? I don't care what your numbers look like. I just want to see you throw the ball. I want to put you in situations that may not be comfortable. I don't care what the numbers say. I don't care what the outside says. I am trying to prepare you in case you have to play this season. I do think that there is a possibility in that as well. And I don't think there's anything sinister if that is something he was thinking.
Hey, Jesse, also, you might have missed Vincent Campos's super chat. Just an FYI.
There's a whole bunch that are down here still.
Okay.
That,
as long as you got them, buddy.
No. I unless it screws up, but it stars them and puts them on the side for me. There's a ton still. I went to Mike Drops first because he had talked about Beal, and that was the newest one, but no. I think we're okay. Brother Bob says, Purdy's pimp, don't be mad. I'm a Niners fan. I like Brock Purdy and Trey Lance. You just left Brock Purdy. Golly,
No,
dude.
come on. You know, I love them both. I'm the guy who pounded the table for Trey Lance.
He's the guy who says they're both going to be franchise quarterbacks.
Seriously, I really do believe in Trey Lance long term. I just don't believe in Trey Lance at Heinz Field. And I know I said it all off season. And I think I've been pretty consistent about that. But I also do think he's going to get there because football is not rocket science. And he's going, and there's not endless variables here. The variables are this. Does he physically have it? Yes. Does he mentally have it? Yes. Is it important to him? Yes. Once you've clicked those 3 boxes, guys, to me, it's just a matter of time.
I agree with that. Sean says, why hasn't Kyle fallen out of love with Darnold yet? Why did he ever fall in love with Darnold?
For sure.
Yeah. It's weird too, because I've heard my buddy Jason Aponte say this too, and I heard this also, I guess, tidbit insider Vish, but not really insider, from a player on the team that when they played them in 2020, Kyle was gushing about one Sammy Darnold.
Wow. Lorenzo says Lance will be starting by week 8 or 10 lock due to the offensive line. Yeah, I hope that nobody gets injured. If Brock Purdy doesn't start all season, I hope it has nothing to do with him getting injured. I just hope that it's because he doesn't perform. I don't want to see him get hurt by any means. Ryan, what's up, Ryan? He says, sup, fellas. What does it mean if Brock Purdy throws 2 drop picks on Saturday? Nothing. Nothing. And
well, it depends, though. It could mean it depends, right? Because if he does try to squeeze it into a tight window and he doesn't have enough zip, it may mean that he does not have enough zip and that he's lost some fastball and that it could be, an indicator of what's to come. So I'll kind of disagree a little bit. I mean, generally in preseason, it just doesn't mean anything, but it's the kind of throw for me. If Brock Purdy is making a 4th down, I'm throwing it up for grabs. No, doesn't matter. He's just in a preseason game trying to make a play. But if he's trying to throw, let's say, a deep out and that ball hangs and there's not enough zip and it doesn't get to the sideline and the DB breaks on it, that could be an indicator that he's lost some fastball. And we've said it a couple times. He doesn't really have fastball to lose. So I think it really kind of the context is going to matter on that one.
I think people like us will maybe say it matters in those situations. When I say it'll mean nothing, I'm more saying in the stratosphere of what 49er fans think. Just like if Trey Lance had played well this last week, a lot of people that don't like Trey Lance would have said that game meant nothing also, right? It's all about what fits the narrative. So if Trey Lance plays bad and I don't like Trey Lance, then I'm going to use that opportunity to say he sucks. But if he had played good last Sunday, they would have used that opportunity to say it's just preseason, do it in a real game. It's all about what fits whoever's narrative. That's how it's going to be talked about.
Well, yeah, that's the bottom line. Everybody is looking to confirm their priors. They actually don't give a rat's ass about what happens on the football field.
Which is freaking sad.
It's the reality of the situation.
Here's Vincent.
Vincent says, Jess, too much red. You need a black hat. You look like a blood.
I'm compensating for Jess. Good old Jess.
There you go. Lorenzo says, weak. He's correcting his earlier comment. I smell danger with this O-line. Yeah, I don't know if I smell danger with the starting offensive line. I smell danger for sure with the depth of this offensive line. No doubt about it. Brother Bob says, Purdy's pimp. I don't saw. Jeez, dude. Come on, man.
What
you got to know that there's certain things I can't read, and I'm not going to. Chrissy says, if Brock doesn't win big, this convo will never end. Yeah, if they don't win the Super Bowl, you're right. The Brock Purdy saga will continue. It's going to be a thing for a while. The Trey Lance part of it might end, but just like last year, it's funny, and I'll never forget saying this. I said, next year at camp, and I told this to Jack on his show, it was right after camp had ended. I said, next year at camp, it'll be nice because Jimmy won't be there, and they'll stop charting these damn throws as if they matter. What I didn't know is that there would be a new quarterback entering that controversy. So Trey Lance may not be here, Does the quarterback controversy end because Trey Lance moves on? I find that hard to believe. It seems like every offseason, somehow, some way,
It feels like
there's
it
a
gets worse,
controversy.
right? Like
It
to
gets
me,
worse.
this is
Yeah,
the worst offseason of it.
for
Like this
sure.
has been
Yes.
terrible.
Yes. Mike Drops with Monza says, if Brock flopped, he would have still brought in Sam Darnold. Oh, so he's talking about for Trey. So if Brock didn't happen, he still would have brought in Sam and prepped to move on from Trey. Every convo about Trey doesn't need to be about Brock. That might actually be true also.
Yeah, I might. It's probably true.
Sean says, who on this panel thinks Brock Purdy will win a Super Bowl in 2 years? Say no, and the we want to win now argument is silly. Playing Brock Purdy is short-sighted. Is he a $200 million quarterback? Once he gets paid, then what's the plan? I'll wait. Well, I'll let you take that one first, Larry, and then we'll go Vish and myself.
Who on this panel thinks Brock Purdy will win a Super Bowl within 2 years? Say no, and we want to win now argument is silly. Playing Brock Purdy is short-sighted. Is he a $2 million quarterback? Once he's paid, then what's the plan? Yeah, you are going to wait. You're going to wait for that answer because we don't know. I mean, it's we don't know. As far as do I think Brock Purdy can win a Super Bowl within the next 2 years? Yeah, I do. And do I think Trey Lance can win a Super Bowl over the next 2 years? No chance. No chance.
Vish?
Yeah, Krugs, right? We really don't know. I guess I've reached a point in the offseason where it's less about my opinion, and the 49ers have made it exceptionally clear what direction they're going at in quarterback. And so, like, hey, playing him might be short-sighted, all of that. I don't know, but I could see why somebody would have that opinion. I could also see why somebody wouldn't have that opinion. But ultimately, that's what the 49ers are going with. So we're just going to have to talk about what results it ultimately yields because they're committed to this.
And then once he's paid, I mean, you're right. I mean, at that point, who knows? Who knows what the roster is going to look like? But how many years are we off on that? How many more years before Brock gets paid big money, 25 million?
2.
Yeah.
2 more years after this. 2 years. This year, next year, you mean?
This year, next year, yeah.
They can pay him after next year, yeah. Yep. Sean, I would say I've got a video on my channel that is basically, it's titled Mr. Right versus Mr. Right Now. And in that video, I say that Brock Purdy, I believe, is Mr. Right Now, and they may even be able to win a Super Bowl with him. But I bring up the same argument you did, where even if that happens, he may not be Mr. Right long term. So I see what you're saying, and I do tend to agree. Ty Bud says, mention Brock's score. Larry mentioned Brock scoring 30 plus. Also, Jimmy G went on a winning streak. When you mentioned Lance going 1 and 2s with scoring difference. Lance,
he adopted PP too.
Yeah, I know.
Pause.
Come on, man. It's not all about CMC. The Niners scored 13. They lost to the Saints with Jimmy G and CMC. So, I mean, and they scored 13 points, or they beat the Saints, but they only scored 13 points. So, I mean, it's not the night. You could ask CMC himself. He would tell you that Brock Purdy had a huge impact on the 49ers in the second half of the year. We're really going to go this. If CMC is the key to everything. I think CMC is a very good player, but you're discounting what Purdy did. You really are.
Can we agree on 2 things? Purdy played really, really well within the offense. The offense changed in some ways for Purdy because there were some play calls that were a little bit more aggressive than they were with Jimmy. But the identity of the offense, the system being impossible to stop, was because they added CMC, not because they changed the quarterback. Is that a fair way to describe all of it?
I think so.
I think so. I mean, just being around the guys. I mean, Juwan Jennings called Brock Star today. He's a Brock Star. Which, instead of rock star. But I mean, Ayuk, Debo, I mean, they're just this team's all behind Brock. Brock threw like 7 dimes today. Trey threw 3 checkdowns to running backs. Darnold was 1 for 7. I mean, if this were a fight, they would stop it.
I want to say this though. I do think I personally think that we get in a little bit of danger, and a lot of people do this on social media where they take a player's word for it. Like, I heard this for years with Jimmy. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about with Jimmy. The players think he's good. That's what matters. And I'm like, well, yeah, but the players aren't. First of all those players are not in the quarterback room knowing exactly what he does game in and game out. All they know is he's on the field and they win with him. Yes, they should love Brock Purdy. He hasn't lost a game. But I do think, again, and we talked about this 2 shows ago, where I said, okay, then would you rather have Elijah Mitchell and Brock Purdy or CMC and Jimmy Garoppolo? To me, that answer is easy. I'm taking CMC and Jimmy Garoppolo because we saw 5 games with CMC and Jimmy Garoppolo, and that scoring went from 18 to 26. And Jimmy Garoppolo, for the first time in his career, looked like a non-shaky quarterback in the pocket, looked confident, and stopped turning the ball over. CMC had a major impact on that.
I would push back and say CMC gave Jimmy a safety valve.
Yes,
but Jimmy, he didn't correct Jimmy's major flaw, which was that Jimmy stopped throwing the ball in the deep third of the field and outside the numbers. So late in the down, you could cheat in the middle of the field, and you could cheat in the short middle and the intermediate middle, pack the field with all kinds of defenders, and he had nowhere to go. And that wasn't going to change because of CMC. But I hear you. I've got great respect for the impact that CMC made. I just think Jimmy was a broken quarterback who no longer was attempting passes in the deep quadrant of the field and no longer was trying to throw things outside the numbers. So everybody just kind of cheated in and cheated up.
Before they got CMC, though, like the Atlanta game, he threw that deep post to Ray McCloud. He dropped it. Then you look at the Carolina game. Remember, Tevin Coleman played in that game, and he threw 2 alert goes
down the field
versus cover 0 to Tevin Coleman. It was like, yo, who's this guy? He's throwing an alert go versus cover 0 and all of that. And then even before he got hurt, he had a rollout versus Miami where he rolls out of the pocket and throws a 20-yard rope like outside down the field to Ray McCloud, right? Like, Jesse, you posted a video with all of these plays, right?
I did, yeah.
Here's the one thing about it, though. What's the major component of Kyle's offense? Play action pass and bootleg game.
Right.
And Brock Purdy,
better suited for that.
Brock Purdy just is so much better in those 2 phases that I as much as I love McCaffrey, if I could have a healthy Mitchell, I'd take Purdy.
Really?
If I could have a healthy Mitchell, yeah.
I guess here's my point, and this is I want to preface this because I know people are going to lose their ever-loving mind when I bring this up. This is not to say, all right, if the question is Brock versus Jimmy, give me Brock every day of the week, twice on Sundays, especially because as a rookie, I think he has room for improvement. And to Larry's point, I think we're capped out with Jimmy. However,
Jimmy was actually regressing, clear. I think.
I want to be, I don't know if he was with CMC. Here's the numbers. They both played 5 games with, let me see if I can zoom in on this. I can't see that with a lick. Maybe you guys can.
It's a 71% completion for Jimmy.
Okay, you can see it. So hold on. I want to preface this. They both played 5 games from start to finish with CMC. And if you look at Jimmy's numbers, I don't even care about the Brock Purdy part. I don't even care. Let's look at just Jimmy Garoppolo. That might have been the most efficient he has ever been in his entire career. And he was looking very, very good in those 5 games. That's all I'm saying. That was a Jimmy Garoppolo that we had not seen.
Records there, though.
4-1 versus 5-0. And the one loss was to the Chiefs. So they lost to the Super Bowl champs. I'm not going to knock them for that. So I'm just saying,
and he played well in that game too until he threw that stupid interception in the red zone.
Until he threw the Hail Mary in the end zone from 5 yards away. Oh, Jimmy Garoppolo had 2 plays last year. One was a pick 8, which I had never seen, and the other one was a Hail Mary from the 2-yard line, which I had also never seen. So that's crazy. And not in a good way. Ty Bud says, yeah, I got that one. Got it. Robbie says, Vish, what did your dad say about Trey Lance after Sunday?
Unfortunately, I couldn't hear his opinion on Trey Lance because he was too busy complaining about, one, having to sit and watch what he called the most boring game ever. Two, he already hated Josh McDaniels, so he complained for 15 minutes on why Josh McDaniels is a douchebag for calling the two timeouts to ice the kicker. And then Krug doesn't want to hear what my dad has to say, but he finished off.
He's all out on your dad.
Right. He finished off the conversation by complaining for 10 minutes about the Raiders commentary crew, who were apparently so biased and said that every Raiders player is the next great player ever. And he said he claims that Tim Ryan and Greg Papa never do this to this extreme, and it got so insufferable he couldn't watch the game anymore. And so I never got his opinion on that, unfortunately.
Your dad's hilarious. Ryan says, who will be a surprising cut in 12 days? I'm going to save that one for Larry because he's there. I think he's going to have a good answer. Ty Bud says, bottom line, you can't compare what Purdy has done versus Lance in real games. It's the same as you counting TDs with 30 reps versus 5.
Krug has a devilish smirk on his face. Like he went back there, did something.
He probably had to pee.
Dude,
I saved this question
I drank
for you.
like 9 bottles of water today. I was at camp. I'm sitting here about to explode.
I saved this question for you. Ryan asked, who will be a surprise cut in 12 days? Vish says it's going to be Ray. Who do you think is going to be, Krug?
It's going to be Camlet too. In fact, there's actually on Twitter right now, there is a source quoted, and I don't know who the source is, but it says source. This is on 49ers Sport at 49ers Sports Talk. They love the kid, but he's getting cut if he doesn't turn it around, and I mean fast. And this is somebody saying, hearing word that the 49ers 2023 third-round pick, Cam Latu, is seriously on the hot seat, needs to show up big the next 2 preseason games, and is jeopardy of not making the 53. There's just too many good tight ends. Willis looks great, and Dwelly's stronger and looks a little bit better, and Warner's in great shape, and obviously there's Kittle, and I think they're probably going with 3 tight ends. I think Latu is going to get squeezed.
Wait. We just talked about the tight ends, and we didn't mention Naperville, Illinois' own Troy Fumagalli from Naperville, Illinois, who
also is playing well. He's actually playing really well. Yeah.
So I don't know if I've told you guys this, but Fumagalli actually is the neighbor of one of my really, really close friends growing up.
And he's playing well. I mean, he's seriously looking great. So,
big Fumagalli fan out here, Krug.
And Latu had one today. Darnold threw him a pass in the red zone, okay, right at the goal line. And it was an out pattern, put it right on his hands. He dropped it, and then he kicked the pylon. He was so pissed at himself. He's all up in his head right now, and he's better than this, but he's not playing
drops can pile up. That's just like when a kicker starts to miss, it can really play with you. Drops are one of those things that it really can pile up. And if you get in your head that you can't catch for whatever reason for this stint, it's going to continue to be an issue. I don't know if he's going to be able to work through it, unfortunately.
Here's my question, though, right? Like, this is a guy that only started playing tight end 3 years ago, right? Or 2 years ago. He was a 4-star recruit to Alabama as a defensive end. So by the way, I haven't seen the kind of athlete that Alabama recruits to play defense, but there has to be some level of freaky athleticism to Latu if he was coming out of high school recruited to be a defensive end at Alabama. But I think there is some rawness to him at the position too. And I felt like when they reached for him in the 3rd round, when they did, it was a situation where it felt like they didn't think that they could come back and get any tight end they liked. So they took the last tight end they liked at that spot, and it was a reach at that spot. And I think that in a lot of ways, now it's been a lot worse than anybody could have expected, but they took a chance on a very raw player again here in Cam Latu, and that rawness, I think, is getting highlighted here in these practices. And then, like you mentioned, he seems to have the yips too.
The other issue is that the timing, right? I mean, if this were year 1, I mean, Joe Williams, if people remember, made the final 53-man roster when the Niners drafted him
Right.
out of Utah, despite the fact he was a huge bust.
He had an injury, Krug.
Right.
Just wait. Cam Latu, that 4th preseason game, back soreness, PUP, back soreness, PUP.
He could. That would be a great idea, but they may also just take a chance that he clears waivers and try to. I definitely think they would put him on the practice squad if they could. But the question
so,
is,
too.
are they or are they not going to expose him to waivers?
Krug, apparently Latu.
I think he would
with
clear.
the knee. It's a knee, Krug. It's a knee. Just wait. That knee's gonna pop up.
I kind of agree with Vish, Jesse.
Nowhere.
I think they'll invent something.
Yeah, I think that actually is a real possibility. I also think you would probably clear waivers, though. Williams
so?
said, actually, the Seahawks are really funny about that. They may not let him. Williams
I'll say this:
says-
if anybody claimed him, man, they're doing so based on what, that Tennessee game, because he didn't have a stellar college career. He was drafted based on traits and projection, not necessarily collegiate production. And then he goes and drops everything in the preseason. I don't know. It would have to be a bad team that was looking to build, or somebody that's just really thin at tight end.
Williams says Pickett, Jones, Dak, Watson. He basically lists like all the quarterbacks the 49ers play this year and say, out of those QBs that we play, who would you take Brock Purdy over? I'm trying to understand 12 wins. So luckily it's not quarterback versus quarterback. It is team versus team. And the 49ers team is so stacked. It's hot. And knowing that Brock Purdy, regardless of what you think of him, can run this offense and keep it efficient and on schedule and put up points in the regular season, that the quarterback being great on the other side doesn't necessarily equate to wins. In the postseason, when you get to that Final Four, I think that's where it does start to matter, because the teams start to even out a lot, and now they're fighting to go home, and the quarterback play starts to matter more. But for me, that's the reason I have them at 12. Like, I'm not necessarily taking him over those quarterbacks, but I don't think that that's necessarily relevant in picking a winner in the regular season.
Right. He's also better supported, right? Like, those offenses put more on those quarterbacks, whereas he plays in a situation where, hey, you reduce the number of times he has to be Superman on 3rd and 8, right? It's something Sean Payton talked about when he was in the media this year. Like, the goal of an offensive coach is, hey, in 10 times in a game, my quarterback's going to have to bail us out. Well, let me make sure that those are the only 10 times he has to bail us out, and I can keep him on time and on schedule with the run game, play action, and the system and all of that. And I know that criticizing Kyle is in vogue right now, but when you can play on time and on schedule within his system, and he gets into a rhythm on how he's sequencing plays, what kind of looks he's getting and all of that, the Niners offense becomes very difficult to defend regardless, as long as the quarterback is just hitting available throws, because it starts being run game, misdirection, screen to Debo, screen to Kittle, end around, run with McCaffrey. It just makes people's heads spin.
And before, can we go back to that for a second? You wouldn't have picked Purdy to beat, Tua. You wouldn't have picked him to beat Brady. And let's be honest here. Let's forget that little comparison and say, okay, how many of those games that you just listed there will the 49ers be favored to win? Probably what, 7? 7 of the 8, maybe? Something like that. Mm-hmm. Who are they? They might not be favored against Philly. They're favored against Pittsburgh. They're favored against the Giants. They'll be favored against Dallas. They'll be favored against Cleveland. They'll be favored against Cincy. They'll be favored against Jacksonville.
You think they'll be favored against Cincy? That's at Cincy, right?
I think they won't be, because it's at Cincy.
We'll see on that one.
No, is it at Cincy or is it? I think it's at home. Because I had them beating
Cincy. Is Baltimore at Baltimore?
One of these games, by the way, is
at Cleveland. I know, and
49ers have a huge rest disadvantage.
I know too, and at Pittsburgh, I know. Both of those two games actually might be home, Jesse. So actually, Krug might be right. They would be favored in all of these in that case,
except for maybe Hurts.
Oh yeah,
they're not. They may not be favored against Philly.
And that Seattle game, when they have to go that stretch, Seattle at Seattle, at Philly, then back home. Isn't that the stretch? At Seattle, at Philly, back home at Seattle. They probably won't be favored at Seattle either, right?
I think they will be.
Seattle
was 26th again in the NFL against the run.
It depends on where they're at during the season. I mean, if Seattle's humming and they're humming, and Seattle's at home. They might be favored, but right now I would say the 49ers should be favored. But I don't know.
Krug, who
I don't
did
think
Seattle
they'll win that
not
game.
re-sign to?
What's that?
Who did they not re-sign to despite being 26th in the run? You always mention it.
They did
Seattle?
re-sign or did not? They
Or
re-signed
did
Bobby
not
Wagner.
re-sign. Did not re-sign.
Woods?
No, I don't know.
Al Woods.
Do I always mention that?
You always mention that, yeah.
Do
Ryan says, instead of stopping the stream, just take 5-minute intermission, get smokes and bathroom break, and run it back. I love this show. Godzilla says,
Is that
let
what you were
Purdy
doing
bake.
back there, Krug?
Yeah,
Seriously, yeah. I was twisting one in the right outside the garage here.
All right, I'm firing through these last ones. Let Purdy bake instead of cook. That's pretty funny, actually. Brother Bob says, surprise cut. Jake can't make Moody. He's not good. Ooh, that would be a surprise.
Well, he doesn't have he doesn't have a 2-year rope, that's for sure.
Huge surprise.
If that's the case and they go with Zane Gonzalez, rumor has it Jake Moody, he's got an ankle / foot / knee / everything in his leg issue that might move him to PUP.
Yeah, will they go with Moody if he doesn't make a field goal in the preseason?
Depends how
with
much
Robbie
they believe in
Gold
him,
standing
right?
by and Zane Gonzalez making
man.
57-yarders in practice.
I don't know. What's up with Kalia Davis? He loves your draft videos, by the way.
Thank you. I love Kalia Davis. He's got great speed, but he has not. He was in uniform today. He's battling back from an injury. I believe it's still a knee. He hasn't gotten on the field. From the next 2 weeks are going to be, the cuts on the 29th. He's got 12 days to fire and show something. He was one of my
disappointments coming back from camp, and not because he's not good, but because I thought he could be good, and I didn't get to see him really. So
what kind of shape
incredibly
is he in,
fast,
though?
but you got to play, man.
Does he look like he would jump in and play, or he looks like
he looks pretty good. He looks pretty good, but I mean, the other reality of the situation is, look at their D-line depth at tackle. They got Armstead and Hargrave. You got Kinlaw and Givens. T.Y. McGill is playing really well. And when I asked Kerry Hyder yesterday after practice, I said, give me the D lineman or two that really is standing out to you in this camp. Kerry Hyder said Marlon Davidson and Alex Barrett. And Davidson is real, guys. He's 300 pounds. Well. He's fast. I don't know what you guys thought of, Jesse, what you thought of him when you were out here watching him. But Marlon Davidson I think in some ways he's a perfect fit for this front. Why? Because he's 6'3", he's 300 pounds, but he played some defensive end at Auburn. He's he's a speedy rusher in a one-gap penetrating, get up the field, sack the quarterback scheme like they have. I think Davidson could be nice. Look for him in the rest of the preseason.
I like it. Brother Bob says, over under Purdy's pimp mentions Brock Purdy 3 times every time he speaks.
Jeez.
Golly, dude, you were just hammering him.
Yeah, jeez. This is like personal now.
Take it easy, man.
Brother Bob, man. Seriously, man. We may have to meet up underneath the bleachers.
Has anybody been on your case this much since you're effing lazy, Larry?
Mike drops with Monza says over under 12 starts for Jimmy G. I'm taking the under. What do you guys think?
I think Jimmy G loses that job to the Purdue rookie.
So I don't want to put that kind of karma out there. I'm going to slam the over here.
I'm not going to say because of injury. I think same thing. I think he just gets to replay. They don't win enough games. They realize they're not making the playoffs, and then they go with the rookie to see what they got before next year's draft. I agree.
He looked good. He looked good. What's his name again?
All day to throw to Aiden O'Connell.
Aiden O'Connell. Yeah, he looked.
He had all day to throw though too.
He did. That's a very, very fair point. He just sat back there
all day. Like, holy cow, Kruger! I thought you were gonna finish your coffee by the time he threw that ball.
He looked good, man. I'll say this, man. I thought it was Purdue. It was the Purdue preseason game because Jalen Graham was flat out awesome.
Gizmo says he takes the over. All right. If the over-under was 2 hours, I took the under and I was wrong. So don't listen to my over-unders. And Ty says, crap, Larry, calling peeps out like Ryan now? No, I mean, I don't think he's going that hard.
Ryan was getting hot. But yeah, but brother Bob and I, we get along a little bit, but only when I have my son on the streams.
He does love Kevin.
He loves
He
Kevin.
does love Kevin. That's
But
for
now
sure.
he's hammering me on Purdy's pimp. Let me ask you this though, brother Bob: if Purdy is really good, then you're going to try to be the pimp.
He owes you a pig in a pickle. How about that?
Seriously, I'll buy you a mink. You can be Purdy's pimp.
Oh my God! Wow, this is geez.
Did I ever tell you the time I got chased through the Tenderloin by a pimp?
Wait, what?
I could go into that story.
I don't know how that story would have come
No,
up.
because if you talk for 5 minutes, there's going to be 5 more super chats, and it's already 12:15
I'm
in the
telling you,
morning.
it happened. It was 1992.
Is this a family-friendly story?
I got chased up the hill in the Tenderloin by a pimp.
Hey, listen. This is not a Larry thing, but I'll tell you, I was read the riot act because somebody who I didn't know who they were was very important because they were also on the radio. So I'll just leave it at that. But anyways, all right, listen. Great show. Appreciate you guys for coming on next week. So this is a traveling show. Next week, we will be over on Vish's channel, Vish Kumaran. Make sure you go subscribe to him, show him love. Next Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 Central, 6:30 in the West, 7:30 Mountain. Yeah, we will be
4:30. It's a 4:30 show in Hawaii, by the way.
Hawaii, yeah, exactly.
By the way, what is Vish's channel's name? Do we if we take down the super, will Vish's channel's name appear on the screen there?
Here, yeah. Actually, let's do this. Probably not, but let me hold on. It will.
Oh,
it will.
Wait. There you go. Now, Vish, is that they can just simply type in at Vish Kumaran, or that's on Twitter though, right?
Yep.
On YouTube as
no,
well.
here too.
On YouTube.
Yep.
Okay, sweet. There you go.
Yep.
Join us.
Brother Bob says
The Conor McGregor version of the word.
Fook. Yeah. I'm not I don't want to give him any play over here. It's not worth it. Anyways, appreciate y'all. Have a blessed night. Peace.